the top of the agenda. It is 6:30, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted, so we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this is the public appearances, public's opportunity to speak. We welcome your input and appreciate the community's engagement. So this is your opportunity to share your comments, questions, or concerns with the board. However, this is the only time during the meeting set aside for public forum, and it's not a forum for dialogue or debate. All comments will be noted, and where appropriate, follow-up may be provided by village staff or by myself at a later time. So we ask that you please state your name, your address, and then you're allotted up to 3 minutes to give your comment, and we ask that you be respectful. We'll start with individuals in the room who have submitted the wish to speak form, following by anyone else in the audience tonight, and then anyone on Zoom. So we do have one wish to speak form, Mike Nordhaus. If you'd like to come up, if you want to give public comment, or I can just state your position. You can either sit or stand. We just ask that you turn the little microphone which is the little guy speaking. Yeah.
You good? Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm here. I'm actually Mike Nordhaus, and I live 3882 Lawton Road, which is the town of Cottage Grove. Used to be a resident of the village, but now I'm in the town. And I'm here for the UTV discussion with, first of all, with the co-share roads that we share with the village. I don't know if you know which. First of all, is everyone kind of familiar with the ATV, UTV side-by-sides? ATV is kind of your four-wheeler, they will call it. It's got the handlebars, a single-seat unit, and that's more used for off-road trails, you know, out hitting the dirt type of a machine. And then the UTV machine is, they call it actually a utility vehicle, and that's what you'll see more of. They're a side-by-side machine, and they haul multi-people. They've got a cargo bed. They're used by multi-functions. They're farmers, ranchers, municipalities, workplaces, construction workers, and people use it for pleasure craft like myself. Actually, the village has a UTV that I work part-time for the village, and there is one, and we use it quite a bit. It's quite a handy machine. But, and then on the flips of all this, the town of Cottage Grove actually a year and a half ago passed an ordinance, and what we did is we did just half of the township. We did everything east of County N and north of 12 and 18 as a trial basis, plus we had some other shared roads with the town of Pleasant Springs, so we had to kind of stay north and east, and we did this on a trial basis about a year and a half ago to see how it would go. And it's in the ordinance that if anything went wrong or at any point in time, you can write an ordinance to say we discontinue this, no more. But the town of Pleasant Springs now has also passed their township for travels on their township as well. So now they come back to us that some of our township that we did not get in our ordinance on the west side of N, they needed us to come back and approve that because the county has also approved of certain county trunk highways for use for these things. I don't know if you've seen that, but County BB east out of Cottage Grove is open all the way out to, well, you can go past Lake Mills to Jefferson County and on beyond with these things. So they have opened it up. So then now Pleasant Springs needed us to open up the whole township so we could get these county trunk MN and county trunk BN opened up for travel. So with that, so we have established an ordinance to open up the whole township. In the southwest part of the township has no issues, but our northwest of the township shares, like, well, it's be Coffee Town, Vilas, Bus Road. We really didn't kind of recognize that because of the school zone through there. Nundle Heights is in the township, and they can go down to Vilas to get on out. But then Gaston Road, it's kind of complicated. You know, we sat down and made maps of all this stuff, and you know, people that live on parts of Vilas Road can leave, but they can't come back because the one side of the road, of course, is township, and the other side of the road is village. So it kind of complicates things, and we'll have to, when we post these signs, we'll have to go out there and actually stop these things because of the barriers we see right now, and that's where we like to see the village kind of adapt an ordinance to kind of, you know, okay, we can co-share these things, and I think it's a good omen for the village and the township. I live in the township, I had places in the village, and maybe it's some one of these things that we can start working together on some of this stuff, you know, overall. These machines now, on the safety aspect, anybody born after January 1st, 1988's got to go through a certification process to be certified to operate these things. And in our township, and a lot of the municipalities write these ordinances, 99% of them say you got to have a valid driver's license. Anybody under 18 years of age has got to wear a helmet. That's the driver, that's the passengers, and that's everyone else in the machines. The machines have got to have headlights, taillights. I know my machine, I've got directionals on them, but they're not recommended, but a lot of people do put them on them now because it is a nice safety factor to have the turn signals on these machines. And I guess anything else, so we passed a law, or our ordinance states, and the village can write anything in their ordinances. You can put restrictions, however, you just don't want to complicate it too much, because then the law officials, you know, they've got to know all the ordinances well, and you don't want to get it too complicated. And that's kind of, I don't know how the law handles this, but like with Vilas Road and them, you know, we got our police division, the township, and the village does too, and the county, and I think they all patrol them areas. So I don't know if it'd be easier for them too to know that, you know, hey, we got ordinances and they can be there, or no, they can't be out here. So, so
I don't mean to cut you off, but
Yeah.
you are a little over time.
Oh,
we are
I'm
gonna,
sorry.
discuss it later
Yeah,
on, but thank you for.
I'm sorry, I wasn't keeping track.
Thank you for, for coming and giving that comment,
Okay.
that perspective.
All right.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? You want to speak? You can come up. I don't want to make you, but yeah, you can just state your name, your address, and then give your comment.
Matthew Haugen, 3784 West Jargo Road, also town of Cottage Grove. I'm just here to support Mike. I've been working with the different towns and villages throughout. I was on the Village of Deerfield committee for developing their ordinance, that kind of thing. I'm a township resident looking to just simplify things, and I'm also a DNR safety instructor, so I can help answer those questions later if needed as well. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to give comment? All right, we'll move on to discuss and consider the minutes from the village board meeting on June 16th, 2025, and the special village board meeting on June 23rd, 2025.
I move approval of the minutes of 6/16/25 and 6/23/25 village board meetings. And I'll second.
All right, there's a motion by Severson and a second by Murphy. Is there any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We have presentations to the board, a presentation by Adams Outdoor regarding the request or proposal to place a digital billboard on the village property. This is for feedback only, and I believe our presenter is on Zoom tonight.
Yes, I am. Am I coming in okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I don't know if you all can see my presentation there. I know it was included with the agenda this evening.
Do you want to share your screen, or would you like us to share it?
If that's easier for you to share, otherwise I can share that
Does
here.
he need access to sharing? You should have access to share.
Okay, my apologies. Give me 1 second. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. My name is Devin Renner. I am the real estate manager for Adams Outdoor for Wisconsin. Adams Outdoor is in multiple markets throughout the United States. We're based here in Madison area, and so we have assets in Dane County and in Kenosha and Racine and up north towards Fond du Lac. So basically today, just looking to do kind of a broad overview. We are interested in building a digital sign on one of the village-owned parcels facing I-94. And so have had some conversations with village staff about the feasibility of that. Currently, ordinances do not allow it. We're looking at putting together a proposal. And so before we formalize that process and go through any sort of approval or application, we are just interested in kind of doing that broad overview and answering any potential questions that typically come up in these sorts of conversations and seeing if we can just get some feedback from the village board. So in terms of what an agreement might look like with the village, so obviously can't talk specifically about what a rent would look like, but what we would be paying to the village general fund would be potentially high 5 figures, low 6 figures annually, and that's something that would have a step increase year over year. We typically ask for a 20-year lease, but we are generally flexible on that. One of the benefits of doing something like this that we find with municipalities is because it goes to the general fund and it's not coming from any sort of grants or any kind of state directed or federal funds. You don't have the usual strings attached to it. So you can put it into the general fund and you can then use it as you like. The city would receive ads per year that they could then freely promote the village events. Any sort of emergency messaging, PSAs, Amber Alerts, the village would then have access to that they could utilize that, whether it's weather, whether it's silver alerts, anything along those lines. And then for just any sort of the maybe chamber events, things of that nature, we can then handle that as far as helping to promote that, and the city would receive that free of charge. In terms of specific sign specs, the board that we're looking at typically is a 14 by 48 with a maximum height of 30 feet. And then all plans and designs would be subject to approval from the village engineer. So this is what we look like as a maximum, but again, in terms of any kind of flexibility, if that's something that would need to be smaller in order to satisfy the village requirements, we're certainly comfortable working within that. One of the questions that we get a lot pertains to lighting, especially on the digital boards. So we try to create a situation where the sign goes dark between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. And that's all year round. It's programmed to adjust lighting based on daylight conditions, sunrise and sunset. And then it's restricted to the 25,000 lumens during daylight and a little over 1,000 lumens at night. And then just to give kind of a comparison there, newer car model LED headlights run 3,000 to 10,000 lumens, and an outdoor business marquee signs that you might see at a Quick Trip typically runs about 1,400 lumens at night. So this is dimmer than both of those. As far as where we are talking about, so this is the Summit Credit Union headquarters, and then immediately to the east of that is a village-owned parcel that would face I-94. It's just off of the on-ramp there. So to give kind of a different view of that, this is the image that we're talking about, or the parcel that we're talking about, excuse me. The setback in terms of where exactly it would be located on that is subject to some conversation with the DOT, but this is at the very least the parcel that we are hoping to potentially build on. Environmental impact. This is another question that we get quite a bit, and so we wanted to cover. So on average, a digital sign runs 142 kilowatts per month, and so by comparison, 2 standard HPS streetlights, which aren't nearly as common anymore, but are kind of the yellow fluorescent lights that you might be used to. 2 of those would run about 180 kilowatts per month, so less than that. And then with dark hours scheduled nightly and the surrounding light from the highway traffic significantly brighter, any impact that we might have to area flora and fauna is mitigated. The company that we use that builds these signs does manufacture their signs in accordance with the green leaf certifications with the California environmental codes. And the digital signs do historically raise property value of surrounding commercial zones. So something to keep in mind in terms of that surrounding commercial area between the village and the town. Maintenance, the system is automated for any sort of outage or pixelating issue, and it issues an automatic alert to our IT staff and to all of our local employees. So with digital signs, one of the other benefits is we don't really need to be on site. Typically our ops crew for our other digital signs that are in the area about once or twice a year need to go out to the property. So it's pretty infrequent. And then any scheduled on-site visit can of course be coordinated with village staff. And then we do have those signs monitored 24/7 via webcam and our supporting software. And then safety is the big one that we get quite frequently. So a report by the US DOT, Federal Highway Administration, confirms that digital billboards do not pose a safety risk to passing motorists. The FBI reports that since 2010, 54 missing children have been found due to Amber Alerts posted on digital billboard. Since 2009, which is when we built our first digital sign in the area, there have been 32 accidents within 500 yards of a digital sign, and none of them have been attributed to the sign itself. The signs are constructed to withstand extreme heat and extreme cold and to withstand 150-mile winds and 170-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And then I created this. This is, of course, is not what it would exactly look like, but just to give an idea, the setback obviously would be much different on this, but I just took this from Google Maps and then created these images. So an idea of what that might potentially look like on that parcel. And that is what I have for the presentation. And so I am happy to answer any questions that I can.
Yeah, I'll open it up to questions from the board. Paula?
Sure. And this is kind of a question more for Matt, because I'm hoping you have institutional memory, but do you remember a few years ago, a local business owner had looked at doing a billboard out in that area and even went through the DOT process, and the DOT did not, do you remember that?
I don't know, is this maybe Poblaki?
That wouldn't have been in the village.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not.
Kyle Broom was the local business owner who was looking at putting signs kind of in that, I don't think it was digital, but a billboard, and had gone through the process of reaching out to the DOT, and the DOT would not approve it. So I don't remember what year that was, and I don't know if you guys remember him coming.
Maybe
Okay.
he started there and then never
Okay.
came to us. If he.
Yeah. So that's one of my concerns, is the DOT is pretty strict with those approvals. So,
Devin, can you maybe speak to the
Sure.
process for the DOT?
Yes, so I'm not familiar with Kyle Broom or the history on that. I have been in touch with our rep with the DOT about this parcel in particular, and talking about what those regulations would look like regarding specifically towards the setback. So the DOT definitely is very strict on these things, especially in regards to interstates. But the two biggest questions that always come up for the DOT and are sort of automatic deal breakers for them are the setback that you have, the amount of feet that you are from the on-ramp or off-ramp, and the zoning of the parcel. So in both of these cases, we would fall within approvable categories. So it's definitely a further setback than we typically do, which is 15 to 20 feet. So we would have to be back further than that, but we'd still be well within that parcel and well within that visibility. So our early conversations with the DOT, when we have not submitted an application to them, have indicated that we could get approval for that.
okay, thank you. So just kind of as a follow-up to that, have you had any contact with Summit Credit Union with this being so close to their property?
Sure. So I have not spoken to them about this. However, Summit Credit Union is a regular advertiser of ours, and we actually have an agreement with Summit Credit Union where they own a sign themselves that we manage for them. So they are certainly a big believer in doing billboard advertising. And so our feeling is that certainly a conversation that we would want to have with them and respect them and be good neighbors to them. But we wanted to have the conversation with you all first, just in terms of getting any general feedback before we approach them to discuss that, at length with them as well.
So that covers, I guess, question of property owners on the other side. But I was wondering about the residential properties on the east side of this. So they're in the town of Cottage Grove, I believe, and town of Sun Prairie is a little bit farther. But what would be the impact of them? And I would assume if it's a zoning change, property owners within a certain distance get notified from our end. But I guess, how does that light impact residential properties nearby?
So we get a lot of questions about that. Is this something I'm going to be able to see from my house? If somebody is within kind of that viewing window of a digital sign, the answer is typically no. But to be able to provide kind of a much better answer, we have material that we can provide both to those residents and to the board that actually comes from the manufacturer that shows sort of what the distance is on something like that. And you can actually see a real-time example of what it might look like if you're, say, 300 feet away or 400 feet away, from the sign, and is this going to be, shining into your bedroom window, sort of thing. And these are designed specifically not to do that. They dim automatically at night. So with the daylight lumen level and the brightness, it certainly would, but at nighttime, no, it dims. So no, you would not see that. And then in the daylight, of course, it's outshone anyway. So no, you don't have that direct impact.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think those materials would be helpful if this goes further. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from board members? I guess maybe Matt and Rick, what processes moving forward would need to happen?
So I think we'd be looking for direction one way or the other. If this is something that the board is interested in pursuing, we can start working with Adams on some sort of lease agreement. It's going to be contingent on all their approvals and things like that. One other, I guess, just comment I would generally make is basically, I mean, we don't control what's on the billboard, right? We can probably put reasonable restrictions in there, but just so the board is aware that, we don't control what's going on that board. So just a consideration. But I know that they would agree to, I've dealt with people from Adams in the past, and they do agree to reasonable content restrictions.
Yeah, Devin, do you have, policies in place with your company that
Yes,
can
we do.
address some of those concerns?
So that's something that we actually do with all of our leaseholders, not just the municipal ones, but if we have, Farmer John and he doesn't want to see, any sort of blue advertising, or doesn't want, any alcohol advertising, any political, that sorts of things, we include that in the lease. And so that's something that's very easy for us to accommodate. If there are specific categories or specific types of messaging that the village would prefer not to see, that's very easy to include from the start, and no, that's never a problem for us.
Rick, for the ordinance change, I guess, would this be a specific carve out for this parcel of land? I don't want it to be too broad and then allow billboards throughout the entire village. And
We would I'd maybe have to talk it over with Aaron. I mean, we could add it as a conditional use in a very specific zoning district or something along those lines. It wouldn't be something that we permit in every district, but it would have to be some sort of district that we're comfortable with where these would be potentially permitted.
we know what that's zoned right now?
I believe it's zoned as open space right now. Rick, I don't know if they could do it as a planned unit development.
Yeah, that is one thought.
than it is
It-
restricted just to that side.
Yeah, it would be a little odd, but we could do it.
So feedback from the board. Are
And-
you,
And I guess the question is, do you guys want a billboard there or not?
that's,
Because
gonna
that's
be my
what, that's what
next
Aaron, I
question
mean,
is,
I'm like, we'll just take this to the board. I mean, we had no feeling one way or another, quite frankly. So whatever you guys want.
Personally, I don't really mind it there. It's in a fine location. It's not gonna be it's not in a place that's gonna affect a lot of people and be obnoxious.
I think that there's, I mean, obviously benefits to revenue for the village. Yeah, and I think a little bit more information for the surrounding neighbors, Summit, and then the neighborhood that's right there, like Heidi mentioned, is something that I'd like to see, but I would be interested in maybe, yes, looking at this in the future. Or giving staff direction to move forward. Others?
I will say I'm not crazy about this idea for a couple of reasons. And part of this is kind of my not personal, but I have a safety concern in that area, and obviously the recent incident at Summit, you know, there's a lot of traffic and things going on over there. So I know he cited the studies about safety, but I have a concern about that. But my bigger thing is, while I appreciate the revenue stream, I would hate for us to spend staff time or resources coming up with zoning changes or lease agreements or that sort of thing, and then the DOT says no. So that's my bigger concern, because they've said no to something out in there in that area before. So I would rather have that approval in hand before we spend any staff time or any village resources on this.
So I can't submit a formal application to the DOT without village approval, but that's not to say I certainly can't have the conversations and kind of go over all the different specs and everything that we're looking for in terms of placement with the DOT. The DOT has people that are dedicated essentially to billboards and signage, and they assign the different companies as reps, and can certainly work with them and then provide that feedback and provide that information to the village so that they know, you know, that village staff isn't wasting time on something that, you know, they're going to black flag at the finish line. So that's something that we're certainly happy to do. As far as any sort of zoning changes or crafting leases, obviously this is something that we do as a company fairly frequently. So we do have quite a few templates that we can kind of build from, and case studies that we can use to kind of see what the path of least resistance is, and then providing that to village staff and kind of customizing that for the village as needed. But that way it's not, you know, building everything from scratch.
Similar to, we're working on a lease with another company. Typically we require developers to sign a reimbursement agreement. So any staff time or fees that we incur as part of developing would get billed back to that company. Now, we obviously haven't reached a formal agreement at all with Adams, but that's something we could look into as well if that's a barrier.
Pete, I think you had your hand up, but then you took it down. I don't know if you want to say something.
Sorry, I was having a little technical problem there. No, I think the revenue stream would be great, and I certainly agree with Paul in the sense that before we take this any further, it'd be great to understand if that DOT hurdle is still something that would prevent this from occurring. I mean, obviously, it's an investment in time, and I think that's the point that's already been made.
Other comments?
Yeah, I'm happy to, you know, work closer with the DOT and get additional clarity. And then that way I can provide that to the board and to village staff so that, yeah, before there's a big time investment, there can be, you know, at the very least a very clear indication from the DOT whether or not this would be approved. Like I said, legally, we can't submit an application until we have village approval, but they are always willing to have those conversations with us ahead of time.
So it sounds like maybe you have your to-do list, and then, you know, touch base with staff again, and then if this does seem like a feasible option, and Cameron, you had some suggestions too, we could bring it back to the village board at a later date with a little bit more information. That sounds Is that enough direction?
Yeah, and probably leaning towards the six figures revenue
Yes, please.
is what I would suggest.
Yeah, that's easy enough to do.
All right, is that enough, Cameron? Okay.
Okay, well,
Right.
thank you all very much for chatting with me this evening, and yeah, look forward to our future conversations.
All right, thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to unfinished business. Discuss and consider the special event permit application from Madison United Rugby. There are two documents in the agenda. Is there someone who would like to discuss these documents with us? Or just, does anyone have any questions on them? There's staff comments that still exist, I believe.
I think my only concern was the comment from EMS about not having dedicated on-site coverage for the August 2nd event. So that was a concern brought up, especially when they're using two pitches. And then just wondering if they have on-site coverage for the other ones, but I don't know if anybody's on.
I know Eric is on, but I'm not sure if Brad's here.
Yeah, I'm here. Since those comments were made, I've had communication with rugby and been able to research the actual event. Historically, we've not had any calls because of that event, and it's mostly attendees as a memorial event and not many spectators. So we felt comfortable with not having EMS coverage for that event. The comment was made under the auspices of not being aware of what was going on and why they had reserved the Bakken Park shelter for their event.
Is Brad on at all? No. Okay. So this is a discuss and consider the application for the remaining events for the year.
I guess we had a lengthy discussion about parking at these. Are these then the dates that we'll be having the overflow parking? Or like, that's clear to staff what days we need to have that prepared? Is that was the purpose of having this kind of like breakdown, right? Or just want to make sure that we're prepared to have our parking plan in place. Did this document help us decide when that would be?
Yes. I believe the July 26th is going to be the big one that we're going to try the overflow parking for.
And then I would think, yeah, we'll test that out, and then potentially the August looks like probably another one, that the overflow with 950 attendees would probably be the other one. Is that?
Yep, August 9th and 10th, yeah.
Yep.
Correct.
Okay.
I would move approval of the special event permit application for Madison United Rugby.
And I will second.
All right, there's a motion by Severson and a second by Murphy. Any more discussion on this?
Are we gonna waive the fees?
That's gonna be my question. So the special event permit allows the village board to waive fees for nonprofits in the village.
Don't we have costs though are we manning the overflow parking initiative and the different things?
We won't be staffing it, no.
Okay.
But we are setting it up.
Correct.
So we do have some costs that goes with this.
Yes.
Are we allowed to partially waive it?
Well, I guess, have they requested it?
I don't know that
Is
it's actually requested, but it says in the memo that another $3,000 or $4,000 becomes significant amount for them.
Yeah, so the ordinance allows them to make the request. So I guess if they haven't requested it, then it's a board decision.
To me, it's more of
but yeah.
an awareness of what they're paying for us. It's not a request, in my opinion.
If we were to approve the application and then they came back to request that we reduce it, would that, then we could still
Yes,
consider
the
that, or-
board could consider that after.
think it would be beneficial in the future to have a checkbox on the permit to say requesting a waiver or something, if there's not already.
I think there's still, yeah, a little bit of adjusting that can happen with the application, but add that to the list.
Yeah,
So
it's work in progress. it
yeah.
seems, yeah.
So there is a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion on the motion on the table right now? Oh, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, it'd be great to see that broken down. And we were talking about their base is 2,000 to 3,000 and then an incremental 3,000 or 4,000. And now we're talking about possibly waiving it. I would like to see that broken down. It's a little unclear. We're talking about they're reserving the shelter and there's a question as to whether they even need the shelter. So it's really kind of messy in terms of what these costs are if we're talking about even considering waiving it.
Yeah, I guess that's on page 3 and 4, under the for staff use, and then there's the fee list.
I see.
But if they come back
page
with
1
a request to, for a waiver, I think they could maybe better define it for us.
Right, a follow-up on
Okay, that
that.
second page is
Sorry, it's
duplicated.
the second PDF on page 3 and 4.
Gotcha, I see it.
Like I could see a breakdown of what they would request a waiver on, and like barricades, you know, if we're putting up barricades for the parking, like maybe they'd still pay for that portion or something like that.
So, but there is no request at this point to waive the fees, right?
Not a formal request, no.
Okay. So we can go ahead and approve it and then address any sort of request down the road. Obviously, we have to recover the cost of what the village incurs.
Yep, that can happen. All right, so there is a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, we're going to move on to new business. We have a long list here. So the first is discuss and consider Resolution 2025-12 honoring Disability Pride Month.
I move approval of resolution number 2025-12, resolution honoring Disability Pride Month in the Village of Cottage Grove.
I second the motion.
All right, there's a motion by Severson and a second by Buenzo. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We have a discuss and consider the Badger Challenge Special Event Permit. This is linked in the agenda as well with comments from staff, which I believe were none.
I would move approval of the Badger Challenge Special Event Permit.
Second.
There's a motion by Murphy and a second by Severson. Any other discussion on the Badger Challenge event permit?
Just a question. Do we know if there's anything going on at the park that day that's scheduled that would increase traffic on Vilas?
On September 21st.
There is not.
Thank you.
All right, with the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Discuss and consider UTV operation on road shared with the town of Cottage Grove. There is a memo in the packets. I don't know if, Renee, you want to?
I don't have a whole lot more to add other than what Mike proposed or discussed earlier, but I agree with what Mike said, that this is also an opportunity for better collaboration between the town and the village. It's an opportunity for other people who use the UTVs to come in and use our businesses in the village. And I do have copies of the Town of Cottage Grove, the ordinance, and so I can provide that to Rick, Matt, for further consideration. but I would like to make a motion to approve that, but I think everybody is going to want to look at the maps and the ordinance and make sure all the checks and balances are in place. If anybody has any questions?
Yeah, open it up to comments.
Just a clarifying question. You know, so I've had town residents ask me about this as well. And so the first consideration was kind of that the area with the shared roads seems to be a concern because there are places that, like they said, they can't get back. So would it be an ordinance to kind of cover the shared roads first or open it up to all of the village? Are you thinking?
To open up to those shared roads, at which then we'll open it up, well, let me rephrase that. Yes, open it to the entire village, sorry. As long as, and Mike had outlined too, the safety, the licensure, you know, so that it's not going to be a bunch of 12-year-olds buzzing around using and operating these machines. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
So we would need a formal ordinance to actually adopt this, and I guess depending on the scope, whether it's just the shared roads or all the roads in the village, we've done ordinances like this in the past, and we can kind of, if that's the direction the board wants to go, we can kind of craft it to suit the village's needs and put those restrictions in there. But there are like signage requirements, so depending on which roads you open, if it's all the village, we just put in signs at the entrances to the village. If it's just specific roads, we have to put signs up on those. So those are kind of minor requirements, but I think we also have to get DNR sort of approval of it, which is a pretty minor step. But I guess just looking for a direction on if this is an ordinance we should put together.
And we can do a trial too, you know, we can look at this after updating or looking at the ordinance and say, you know, we approved this and then 6 months from now we revisit to make sure that this has been a feasible issue that this is working for both the village and the people who use the UTVs.
I guess I have a question for Chief Gary about is there a difference between a UTV and like an LSV, like that they have like a VIN and like is there a difference like between
Yes, they are different in classifications. UTVs, ATVs do have VINs. They have all the same requirements in that regards. As this memo was written, I was just looking at the shared roads. I was not looking at the village roads as a whole. I have some concerns about just adopting the town of Cottage Grove's ordinance. They don't cover off-road motorbikes at all, which, again, that's another area that has to be addressed. The other concern that I do have, and it's nothing against UTVs or ATV operators in any way, shape, or form, but one area is operation while intoxicated. They are not counted against your driving record. They are only a DNR violation, same as a snowmobile. So people can literally, truly go out and, yes, have a valid license, but again, could be out operating and just get a DNR citation.
Would it be feasible then to open it up to the shared roads that are outlined and then maybe in the future consider all of Cottage Grove?
I guess some of the shared roads that we have had a lot of safety concerns with. So I'm kind of concerned about adding another vehicle to those roads, like Vilas, with all of the, traffic that we've talked about going to Bakken Park, and then Bus Road next to the schools. I mean, there's a lot of traffic in these areas already, and then adding another vehicle into the mix, like that, it definitely gives me some hesitation on that.
I appreciate the bringing up the safety concern. I would imagine that the UTVs are going to be used more like during hunting season and not at the same time where schools are going to be, we're going to have more school traffic.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm wrong.
I'll just interject on that. I will speak for other communities that have opened up. They become modes of transportation just as your car, just as a motorcycle. People use them to run to stores, do their daily activities. So once you open this, it is accessible for them to utilize how they see fit as long as they follow the laws.
I think it's worth considering just opening up these, the roads that we've discussed, the Gaston and Bus Road and Vilas and Coffee Town, and not include the entire village.
Oh, Pete, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, Chief, I had a question. So you talked about the way that drinking and driving impacts that. I would assume that in order for these to be driven on the roads, they have to be licensed. The drivers have to be 16 years or older and have a valid driver's license, I'm assuming. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want anybody that's not licensed to do that. And then as far as lights, brake lights, and all the other things that you need to have on a normal road vehicle, are those required as well?
As long as the ordinance is written to cover all those things, yes.
Yeah, is that how the town ordinance is written?
Yes. It's Renee, yes.
I would be open to looking at those shared roads as a first step. And I'm also looking at the village of Deerfield. They passed the ordinance, I believe, last year, and I'm looking at their ordinance, and there are provisions about no person may drink alcohol beverages. There's different things tied in there, so maybe that's, if I don't know if you've looked at Deerfield, if that's a better model ordinance than maybe the town has, but I would be open to that.
I'm more than happy to work with Rick to craft an ordinance.
Yes, I guess just to the point about the alcohol, like the drinking and driving, it is sort of like this blind spot in the law, so it doesn't count. Like, you could be convicted of the drinking and driving, like it's still not lawful, but it just doesn't count on like the OWI count. So that's just one that, like Chief mentioned, it's sort of like a blind spot. The legislature has tried to fix that in the past, or like they've introduced bills, but it hasn't passed the legislature.
I think there's a lot of safety checks already in place, that people do have to have a license, born after such and such a date, having to take the safety course. So I don't get the feeling that people are using these UTVs just to go around drinking and driving. But yes, you're bringing up those concerns, I think, is worthwhile having this discussion.
I think my biggest concern is the stretch of Vilas that I think, we've spent the last however many board meetings talking about traffic and making changes and preventing parking on the sides. And I think at one point the word deadly was used to describe parking or the situation over there. And we've done a lot of good things to make sure that it's a lot safer for everyone that goes to that park and participates in events that happen at that park. So seeing Vilas on the list is a little bit of a trigger for me, knowing that we want to make sure that that area is as safe as possible. And the same thing with bus and not being a school zone. Do ATVs, do they have to drive slower than normal traffic? There is an expert in the room, if it's okay. Can I have him answer it? Can you come up to the microphone, please?
What they do is follow the traffic rules. The county, Dane County, for one though, did post their own speed limit for if you see that's posted at 35. And I'll tell you what, I've been on BB with mine, and I feel like an Amish in a buggy. doing 35. It's kind of a hazard what they did, but yeah, for the most part, like the town of Cottage Grove, pretty much all our roads are posted at 45, and that's the speed limit you gotta go at. If the speed limit in the village is 25, that's what they gotta go with. Whatever that's posted for the law for automobiles, that's what the UTV side-by-side's gotta go by.
Can I ask another probably silly question, but are you allowed to go, you're allowed to go on Highway BB?
Just east out of town.
Sorry.
Just east out of town. They did not go towards Madison because of traffic, but the township is looking at from Vilas Hope Road, because Vilas Hope is a town road, and they're looking at maybe trying to have the county approve of Vilas Hope to Vilas.
That was my question, was
Yeah,
to cross
that's
there,
in the
you have to get
process.
county approval.
Yeah, but County Trunk N is not, they will not ordinance for County Trunk N because of traffic. They looked at areas, you know, anything that kind of buffers in real close to Madison, like County Trunk A, B, you get up at TT and T when it gets in towards Madison, they do not allow, they didn't approve of that, but County Trunk T out in the town of Sun Prairie is approved. But there is a lot of municipalities out there. Fort Atkinson, the Dells even has opened up, the whole city, the Dells, Marshall's been opened up for quite a number of years, and I think you can contact them. I just don't think they have any issues with this. I think everybody's, you know, like myself, we kind of traded our Harleys in for side-by-sides. and people, there's a lot of investment in these things, and they ain't out there to horse around with them for the most part. Everybody wants to not ruin a good thing, and I think they follow the rules pretty good. I live in a town where we did open it up for a year and a half now, and boy, I haven't seen much go on. I know you're concerned about Vilas Road with the traffic, but these things ain't gonna be out there when the school is open and closing or the rush hours, and really to think about it, that Vilas Road, what you're gonna see more is the people in the northwest part of the township leaving and coming back. You ain't gonna see a lot of traffic from other areas going that way because it does not go anywhere. You know, it's gonna be more of the residents that are gonna come and go. You ain't gonna see a bunch of side-by-sides or ATVs from outsiders coming in because there's no place to go unless they wanna go see a friend at their house. Okay?
Thank you. Pete, you have your hand up again.
Sorry about that. I didn't take it down from before.
Paula, go ahead.
Is there a committee that we could refer this to maybe dig into a little bit more and come up with some framework? I mean, I know we used to have an ordinance review committee, which I don't think we do anymore. So I'm trying to think if there's an appropriate committee, if this would be like a public works thing or LEC. I would also suggest like reaching out to our fire and EMS chiefs about any, like, I know we have a fire UTV too, but anyway, what committee could we maybe task with digging into this a little bit before we get to the point of saying yes or no to an ordinance?
I guess I would maybe make the recommendation of LEC, knowing that there's probably a lot of, well, and maybe public works is a good option too. Chris, what do you suggest? Microphone.
Yeah.
I guess I would defer to Chief and Kyla if they have any thoughts on that.
I'd be happy to work with Kyla, and we'll bring it to both committees so that we cover both avenues, and work with Rick to make sure that we're covering the village's bases.
Renee, can I ask a clarifying question too of how, and I know that obviously residents have reached out, but has the town reached out at all requesting this? I know that they made that their kind of sweeping ordinance change, but I never saw communication come through on whether they were approaching us on asking us to change this, because I know we're going to incur costs with signs and our committees and our staff, and an ordinance change does have costs associated with it, and we want to be mindful of that. And I didn't know if they were.
So it was town resident just approached and opened up the conversation.
Okay.
On that follow-up, I think we've approached the town for some pedestrian bike path connections and have been met with some resistance on that, where I think it would be very beneficial to both communities. So, you know, I would hope that if we were to work on something like this, that would be a good example, you know, where we've offered to pay to make the connections and maintain them. And so, you know, pedestrians from both sides can.
Which was
you know,
last year
right.
at this time.
So I just, I hope that, you know, we can make headway on some of those things too, to improve the, you know, quality of life and connectivity for, you know, all of our residents in, you know, the village and the town, because I know we do share a lot of connectivity.
I like that idea, Heidi, and I think this is an opportunity for us to start re-collaborating with the town in some of these issues, because I think that's important too, bike trails and pedestrian. And I think, you know, having this discussion and looking at this in depth really opens up that opportunity. And I have found, just being on the joint fire committee, that the town board on that community, that they're very open to having discussions with the village in different areas. So I feel like this is a positive opportunity for us and for future.
I think staff have direction. I don't necessarily think any type of formal motion needs to be made tonight, because we will send it off to committees and it'll come back through the proper channels, if that's all right with everyone.
And I just wanted to clarify too, that I'm not necessarily saying that the committees have to write an ordinance, but at least just start with the conversation. What are the concerns before, and then bringing it back to the board before we talk about writing anything.
Sure. All right. Then we will move on to D, discuss and consider the block party application for Jessica Ball. The application is in the agenda.
Move approval of the block party application for Jessica Ball.
Second.
There's a motion by Murphy and a second by Severson. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We are on E, discuss and consider the 2026 to 2035 capital prioritization plan. There is a memo and the packet in the agenda.
All right, I will kick this off, but again, this is a board-driven process, so we started this process in April. Departments submitted projects for evaluation, and then finally we got to the point where the board, based off of the prioritization guidelines, graded the projects. So I'll get the draft kind of plan shared here.
Can I just do a little PSA while you're putting that up then?
Of course.
Just to say that this is obviously if you haven't gone through it, I've only gone through it once, but I've watched the process quite a bit. This year, or 2026 and 2027 are probably the most critical years. So if we do architect and engineering, we're kind of committed to some of those projects. We wouldn't want that money to go to waste. So focusing on the short term and making sure that that is exactly board or staff have their direction moving forward is the most important, in my opinion. And then as you move out in the 10-year plan, those projects likely have a little bit more wiggle room. But if we are going to change anything or move anything, we want to make sure that, I think we need to make sure that we're giving staff really clear direction, because this is kicking off that budget process, and we have to go through kind of we have a short timeline to do a lot of work. And so we want to make sure that we're really clear tonight when we're approving these things, if we make any changes.
Thank you. Kind of as Cindy mentioned, this really does kick off that budget discussion. So, you know, you have most projects either take the winter before the project starts. We have engineering or much larger scale projects like the police station have even longer 18 to 20 month time horizon. So really what we're doing is, you know, through our rating agency's process, we have to demonstrate the ability that we are planning our infrastructure at a minimum of 5 years. 10 years is recommended, and operating expenditures at 5 years. So this is leading into that process of what do we put in our 10-year financial management plan that comes back here in August. So Sean, for the 3rd years in a row, got a park project on the front of the plan. It will not be a park project next year, but this is Houston Park that was completed last year, or this year, and is open. So each year, again, the guidelines, they primarily stay the same with the exception of adjustments for what is our new capacity from a overall debt perspective. The last couple of years, with the magnitude of the police project, we have not adjusted the overall 10-year horizon of amount of debt to issue or a maximum amount. Following the completion of that project or the proposed completion of that project, you may see some differences in the evaluation guidelines next year. Again, as projects and things develop, our capacity grows. So the priority of this is, there's a lot of asks as part of this process. Not necessarily everything that's in this list is something that has to be done tomorrow. So us as staff, in order to bring a realistic budget forward to the board, and with the board a couple years ago, came up with these different categories, ranking from A through F based off of a logical step process on the urgency of a project. The current prioritization guidelines stress public safety and infrastructure, with then new initiative or new projects or projects that don't necessarily need to be done in the first 5 years of the project, receiving lower grades. Just in the packet, I did include what the survey was that each one of you went through this year. I apologize, it's a couple pages here. In project order, which isn't very helpful, which later on in the packet is based off of prioritization, there are 26 projects that were evaluated this year. The 27th box of the survey was a comment. I did include comments for board members kind of to see where each other were ahead of this meeting on if there are certain comments and things to start discussion tonight. Overall, with 6 board members, if you looked at last year's kind of grading, you have to go out 1 decimal place to figure out if it's a A plus, B plus, B, C. But again, kept the comments in here from each board member. And then finally, with the packet that I provided, when board members were grading projects, I did include if every project was going to move forward, because I think this was some disconnect that we've had in the past. If every project or infrastructure project would move forward, this is what the pulverization and repaving projects along with reconstruction, and then again, intersections to be considered. So any changes tonight to major projects may affect some of the pulverization and repaving projects in here. As we kind of mentioned before, Ollie Street and County N were discussed last year. They were ultimately pushed a year on the public works side to align with the utility year, because those years from a planning perspective were 1 year off. So what's being provided in the summary is that both Ollie and County N Highway Main Street would have both street reconstruction project as well as water and sewer utility projects. Again, just as an FYI, staff and I work within the budget that was identified for each bucket. So vehicle and equipment, with that roughly $1 million bucket is laid out just to show the overall replacement schedule of our assets, as well as we increase what are potentially new equipment. So anything that has replacement by it would be a replacement of existing equipment, and anything with new would be something or an initiative that could be potentially taken on. There's a couple larger purchases, and it is a question that I got a couple times this year. You know, why were we grading ladder one? Ladder one, if we'd fund completely with our vehicles and equipment budget, we wouldn't be able to do anything else. Therefore, we'd fall behind on some of our equipment and vehicles. So that was pushed forward to be a major item. That was approved by a prior board, but again, giving each board up until purchase an opportunity to grade that project. Both the costs for EMS and fire on this list are allocated by the projected share of what we will have as part of those costs. The other thing I noted in my memo, and again, Sean mentioned a couple different prices, but I did have the $62,500 for some of those Bakken parking lot improvements that were discussed. Again, wonderful if we come below that, but wanted to make sure we still fit within our allocation. Each of these projects formally comes forward during the budget process, so the budget process is the best time to kind of debate the vehicles and equipment replacement. If there's something, I'll give the infamous example, like a street or a leaf vacuum. That would be an example of a new service that would go first on the major equipment because there's an operating and major expense component to it. The next page here has the board prioritization, again, in order of score. Any project with a 2.33 was funded in this current draft version of this plan. There was no other moving around slotting. There was just an aggregate of best score to least score in this project to stay within the prioritization parameters. I do also want to note here, so one project in particular, Project 4, the DNR Trailhead project. So I have the full cost on here listed, but again, only $10,000 of that is estimated to be the village's share. There could be other instances in here that the village would actively be looking for grants or other funding mechanisms, but again, we have to start somewhere, starting with the gross, and we can work back from a project estimate perspective. So with that, took the projects that fit within the grading and put them across the 10-year to kind of give you, based off of what the current guidelines and parameters and the staff recommended year, how the plan would look currently. So what we're looking for tonight, again, less focus on the vehicles and equipment and then the road, sidewalk, trail maintenance, because this leads into it, and more focus on the major projects. And then we'll can discuss it from there. And Kyla is online to answer questions about infrastructure, which I'm not qualified to answer.
All right, open it up to comments from board members.
Can I go? Okay. Vehicles, if that's okay. Just a couple questions.
No worries.
Chief, the drones, I don't really have any comments on that besides, is that 2 drones in 2026?
It would be one drone.
One drone? Is it thermal by chance?
I would be seeking to get thermal.
Okay, I was gonna hope that you would. And then for the squads, I assume 160 is one car. Are there any of these that's?
2.
160 is 2 cars, okay.
Yep. I apologize. I was gonna work on getting that separated out into the fleet.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, are any of these 3, 4? Is it 2 every year?
2029 is 3. I think we got a couple years of, we have 2 years of 3 and then back down to 2.
Okay.
We got a little bit in an issue with how everything was back ordered with COVID. So when Chief was looking through this,
Okay.
so if anybody remembers, we got 2 cars that we were supposed to get in 24 at the end of 24, while still catching up on our 2025 ordering. So we're working to make sure that we layer that in.
Okay. So it's 160 for 2 cars and 2 uplifting?
Correct.
That seems pretty good to me. I added these up, and there's, over the 10-year period, it's about 330,000 over, not including the ladder truck.
For the vehicles?
For the vehicles, yeah.
Vehicles are way over. Again, really hyper-focused on the first 2 years of that plan. You'll also see fire has in year 2033, engine 4, which is our portion alone is just over $1 million. Again, something that will need to be considered possibly bringing out to as a major item.
Okay.
More to come.
Okay, so the only 2 projects I'd like to talk about is, first of all, for the streets project, I think we need to move up Progress Drive. This was in my memo, but I'm just gonna say it again. I think we need to move it up because the condition of the road is already terrible. And if assuming we're gonna go ahead with the police station, it's gonna get even worse. And I don't think that road can last another 5 years. So I personally would like to see it in 2027 after the police station is done to redo that road. It would also probably help to not have to repair police vehicles that are hitting potholes. And then looking at the sidewalk, the intersection improvements, we've got 2 in 2030. N in Parkview and N in North Lawn. They're both 364,000. Is that some kind of, is there a, what do you call it? You get more or you get less if you do both at the same time? Or could we split those just because there's nothing going on in 2029? And we talked a lot when we discussed the police station project about not going up and down in total amount. So if they're both in 2030, it's gonna be a difference of 785 grand from one year to the next for total. Whereas if we split them, one in 2029 and one in 2030, it stays pretty steady year to year. Is there a reason they're both in 1 year?
Cam, if you don't mind, I'll speak to this.
Yes, please.
So when I was putting together the prioritization plan from my standpoint, one of the things that I did was, and as you'll see in the road, sidewalk, and trail maintenance, is you have larger projects every other year for the maintenance plan. So 2028, 2030, 2032, you do a larger road reconstruction, pulverization maintenance, kind of in one neighborhood, kind of, for lack of better terms, blow up the neighborhood, kind of very much like we did the Crawford Plat last year. You kind of get a more bang for your buck, you're out of that neighborhood, and you're not back for several more years. When looking at large reconstruction projects, I kind of alternated those between the years that we did large pulverization plans. So those intersections can be moved around. In 2029, I think I had recommended like BB or N having a reconstruction or and I don't know it off the top of my head, or an urbanization. So that's kind of where I was offsetting those. Now those weren't moved forward in the plan, so those can be kind of addressed looking down the line for those intersections.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Chris, if you look at 2030, North Parkview is listed as well as West Lawn Drive. And then that would kind of align at those intersections. So we're hitting the intersections the same time as that general area.
I think that was one that I had commented on too, that I would, from a user perspective, I'd like that moved up.
Yeah.
Just in safety, safe routes to school, and there's a lot of, I think, the ask is to have people go down to Oak Street to use the flashers versus crossing at their neighborhood.
I mean, if you live right there on Parkview and N, it's only a quarter mile to like Willow Run Park. But to actually walk safely, you gotta go like a mile, because you gotta go all the way around.
So, but is the scope of the intersections, the $364,000 for each of those in 2030, that's more than just crossing lights, right?
It would be looking at pedestrian improvements, traffic signals, whether bump outs. It would be kind of more of a user-friendly for pedestrians, and vehicle users for
So I
those
guess the question
intersections.
is there a more cost-effective way to address city's concern or Chris's concern about a safer crossing environment, at least quicker than the 2030 timeframe?
I'd have to look into that more. I mean, you don't want to have too many RRFBs in one place. Looking at signals when they're warranted, it's not just as simple as putting up signals and RRFBs.
That makes
That's
complete
something-
sense.
I think a good example of that is the Taylor and Wheeled Bridge, how there were multiple options that went through committees and then came up with a conclusion on what exactly needed to do there. And it could have been a whole thing or a reduced scale. But I'd like to see that happen at those two intersections earlier than 2030.
So, kind of what you'll see with community being kind of brought back here in different scopes compared to last year. Typically, what we'll do is we'll get all the feedback from the board, and that would be something that Public Works would be tasked on to next year through the process come up with different suggestions on how we could address those intersections sooner, if that's okay with the board.
We do have that Safe Streets for All grant that I think this would be an excellent use to, incorporate all, I think it's more than 100,000, right? To do a study, maybe Public Works can start to work on some kind of plan on how we can study where to get the most bang for our buck.
Yeah,
We do have the study and the grant. We're waiting for finalization from the grant to be awarded from the state. So once that's moving forward, I'm going to be moving forward with RFP and everything that accompanies that.
Awesome, yeah, thank you. The other one I mentioned, crossing was in the plan. I know this is a little bit switching gears, but on Cottage Grove Road, we have that long stretch from Southing Grange to Main Street where there's just crosswalks, and so that might be another stretch that I'd be interested in looking at. There's like the big project of kind of redoing that and making it more pedestrian friendly, but in the meantime, since that didn't make the plan, maybe there's someplace we can improve a crossing like in that middle stretch there too.
Yeah, I think that goes with my theme of focusing on the first couple of years here, right? But then I think, that's good direction for next year to have maybe some other solutions to expedite some of these intersection safety issues.
I just also wanted to circle back to Progress Drive to see what other people thought.
I was going to say I'm totally on board with you with Progress Drive because I think with the construction it's going to get in worse shape. And then not just for the police station, the police cars, but we have CQC and Hydrite that are using a portion of that. Obviously, we have a residential development further down the street, so I would like to see that bumped up as well. I also agree on the pedestrian. I'd like to see those bumped up as well. And then two other notes that I had, they're not huge, but I did bring them to Kyla, was Uphoff. It's a teeny little stretch right over there, but that's not in good shape. And then when we looked at the section of BB, there's a section from Damascus to about the post office that's in really rough shape. That should be sooner than the rest of BB when we get to that corridor. So again, I don't know if this is a thing where we should kind of have these conversations in Public Works first, but definitely on board with progress and the pedestrian things.
This is really helpful for us, especially because we're not necessarily looking to finalize the roads today. So once we get the major prioritization done, I think what would be helpful is sitting down with Kyla Strand and myself and thinking, okay, I know this is what our allocation is for this, but if we want to loop in these roads, what could be the cost, and then being able to present that back to the board. Sorry, Kyla.
No, you're good. I agree with you.
So for
And when I look at that, the 10-year, when you kind of map it out, you don't even have those on that list, Cam.
I think I see Progress Drive, but Uphoff, no, the two that Paula mentioned, no.
Mm-hmm.
I th-
I've got those on my list to follow up on.
I mean, the two BB projects are pretty big projects. They were, what, 2 million and 2.6?
Yeah, they're bigger, and I think, you know, the main crux of BB is in good shape for a while, except that little part between Damascus and the post office. I also think, Heidi, your point about some sort of pedestrian thing, I see a lot of people crossing at the post office, and that's very concerning. So I think looking to see if we can do something with that as well.
As developments start to come into that area, I'm assuming we would see other types of improvements that are necessary. That's just a comment. You don't have to respond.
Okay.
I should have ended with a down flexion of an up flexion, sorry.
I guess on that note, though, with developments where we're looking to see improvements, the A-Day hasn't started yet, but they will be putting bike path on their frontage. But then there's still that gap between Glacial Drumlin School on Cottage Grove Road and then connecting, and then our portion of the cost to cross over to Shady Grove. Is so that's the portion, and this is like next year. So that's kind of one we're really zoned in on if to move forward with that, to make that connection so those neighborhoods can get to the schools, and like we're to kind of like zone in on the upcoming years, which are the most critical for budget, to make sure that we have design time. Is that kind of what we're?
Correct.
Okay.
And just to note on that, Heidi, because of the Heyday project moving forward for a good portion of that trail being reconstructed or constructed in general in front of the Heyday development, I also looped in the Damascus Trail that's in front of the school from Cottage Grove Road up to Killian. That would be a part of being repaved. This way it's a little larger project of a multi-use path instead of two little parts. Got to get a more bang for your buck, and that was scheduled to be replaced down the line as well.
So then part of that, so it's just sidewalk width, I think, on the Cottage Grove Road portion. So that would become bike path width, is that correct?
Yes, that would be the plan.
Okay.
Other comments from board members? So it sounds like.
I guess I had a question for Chief on the vehicle. So how many vehicles we got right now? We're adding 2 a year. It just seems like we're adding a lot of police vehicles, and if we've got 2 on the road 24/7, what is the life expectancy, and how could we actually stretch that out a little bit?
So when I came in, they really didn't have a rotation plan in place. I'm trying to get 3 years out of a squad, so that's why the fluctuation you see 2 versus 3, depending on the year. Currently, we are taking 2 squads out of commission. One is an 18 and one is a 20. So, and those are being replaced by 2025s. I have requested 2 for next year. That I'll, again, depending on where the mileage is, I've got a 21, a 22, and a 23. And again, depending on how the mileage is on those and what we're paying in maintenance, I would decommission 2 of those next year. So, and keep our fleet at approximately 9.
What's the ballpark?
When you say we're trying to get 3 years out of a vehicle, if we've got 2 vehicles 24/7 as kind of our base case, I'm struggling with that. We need that many vehicles. I mean, right now we've got 8. We're going to add 2, 2, 2. In the next 3 years, we're going to add 6 vehicles, right?
But again, you're right. If I have 2 officers on the road, but that doesn't account for when I have an officer that's tied up on a call that's hung over. That doesn't account for when we have larger events. It doesn't account for when I have officers out on grants. So like today, truly, I had a sergeant and 3 patrol officers that just regular scheduled work shifts. One of those was a canine officer, so he's assigned a squad. I have the sergeant that has a car, and then the 2 officers. One of the cars that they were supposed to be assigned into, I had to take out of service today for maintenance purposes. That's out of service for the next 2 days. So they're into a different vehicle. And again, I'm trying to space out the mileage so that when we're not burning out the cars, where we're replacing them every year.
And when you say mileage, what is our life expectancy of a squad on miles?
Truthfully, if I can get 100,000 miles out of a squad, I'm happy. I'm targeting 120 if possible. But again, it all depends on what the maintenance does to me, because that affects my budget.
Got it.
I was gonna ask ballpark, what they put on a year, but
I had 2 squads and 2 new squads that I put in service when they came in this year. Literally, we've got 13 and 15,000 miles on them already. So I've rotated those out for 2 of the older cars to put miles on those. Again, offsetting when I'm putting maintenance into them. So
and then the detective also takes a car, doesn't he?
does not.
No, he does not?
No.
Okay.
When I started, the board was replacing 1 vehicle at a time. Again, shortly after the 2015 separation from the town. So it's been a little bit of a struggle building up to a fleet. We're finally getting to that point, but that's why you've seen more aggressive replacements. We are getting, we send the cars to surplus, and that does offset the cost of purchasing. Again, I want to make sure I show you guys everything at gross. When we sell it, that takes off the cost. Good questions.
Other comments?
Yeah.
All right.
So it's not a lot of money, but the street lights for the DNR trailhead, there are lights there right now, right?
There are not within the parking lot,
Not in the parking lot.
not in the
Okay.
parking.
And Cameron had said that that's a total all-in cost, but that's not probably the true cost of the village, correct? Because it's a DNR.
Correct.
Village.
$49,000 is the estimated, of which DNR says they're willing to pay for $30,000.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big number, but I mean, we keep talking about, I gotta add this, this has to move up, this has to move up. We really need to really scrutinize everything that we're doing.
I guess the other thing that is worth talking about briefly here is the community park improvement shelter, because that's something we kind of kicked down from last year, because it's not accessible and it's becoming like very extensive maintenance issues. So, we were looking at just Band-Aid it and make it, what's existing last longer, replace it with, the similar type shelter that we have, or add in, an all-season community room. And from the rankings, it looks like we're looking at the kind of middle, replace the shelter. So I just, I definitely saw the benefits of having year-round. We don't have any other year-round, although we are proposing the community room at the police station, which may help cover some of those like community civic organizations that may want to use community space. I do think it'd be beneficial to have it in a park, but I totally get that, you know, to shave down costs to replace it with the shelter. It's not that much more than just Band-Aiding it that would only last a few years. So I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
I agree with that, Heidi, for budgetary reasons, to table that one for a couple of years. And me being new to the board, I was looking at the cost of that going, okay, so where are we, if somebody could fill me in, like where are we getting these bids from? Is there a possibility to shave down costs with maybe somebody local doing that? These are just questions that I'm unfamiliar with the answers to.
So just a practice in general, because it applies to every department, and then I'll kick it off to Sean. This is a project that we would bid. So, and we would make sure we would get the best bang for your buck. What sometimes is an issue, and we are conservative in the numbers in here because we don't want a number to come back more expensive than what's in our plan. So we hope that it's less than this. There's a little bit of a contingency built into these projects. I think Strand looked at this again this year after looking at it last year.
Correct.
Yep.
They looked at it this year, yes.
And I will paraphrase Sean. He was like, what's the cheapest option we can do? Which is that was the Band-Aid option, and then what can we get things to ADA? Again, I think at 903 for 2027, still pretty sizable investment. The next question could be is if that isn't palatable, like if there's a way to break that out into multiple years. Typically, piecemealing it is a little bit more expensive, but those are things that if this would stand in the 27 budget, there would be 2026 engineering and some A&E, and those options could be explored more and refined.
I like that idea just because of our budgetary constraints and what we're looking at, moving things around and what we've already discussed and what Peter had mentioned as well.
And that proposed shelter is basically the same size as the existing shelter. We just went off of that. Doesn't mean we can't look to make it smaller or larger for that matter too. So that's just the base.
I think I'm kind of in agreement that, like, for instance, if we do move Progress Drive to 2027, that would probably be one thing we'd need to take out. But depending on what those numbers are for Progress, I mean, if it's not even, like, if they're not close, then we'll have some other decisions to make. But I kind of saw that question as like, pick one of these three options, right? And so like for me, I looked at that as what's the least objectionable. But it doesn't have to be a huge priority. I thought that was the best choice of the three presented. That's the way I looked at it.
I think knowing that potentially, Bakken Park would have been eventually put into the plan, and I was thinking that maybe Community Park would take the place of Bakken if the Miracle League goes forward with redoing that playground. So I kind of envision this more in the 2030 plan.
I have another question with the N and Main Street reconstruction, which is definitely important. But if the village has bought that land, would it be feasible maybe to table that for a year or two to see where the village growth goes?
Unfortunately, that project's being primarily driven by water and sewer. So what's on here is just the street portion. Right now, we're evaluating how much on the water and sewer side will be cash funded and debt funded. Most of those projects will likely be cash funded on the utility side. But that's where that project's coming from. The reconstruction ones aren't the fun ones. And we're very, I do want to put this out, we are very fortunate at the age of our utilities. A vast majority of the utilities in the village is fairly close to new. So I'm glad that we can really minimize and take advantage of addressing some other needs until that, we have pretty much reconstructions every year.
So we gave feedback on some roads and some intersections and some projects that are later on in the proposal we'd like to see moved up. Do you feel like you have enough from us? Is it clear-ish?
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of summarize. So we want to look at Progress Drive. Kyla and I are gonna look at Uphoff Drive and then between Damascus and the post office. Public Works gonna kind of have implied direction here to evaluate some of the intersections. What are other options that we can do that are not necessarily reconstruction or re-engineering those intersections? And then I don't believe there was anything else.
Do board members have any other questions about the plan as presented?
So are we looking to formally have a motion on that with those notes to explore?
Because I think the big things that were talked about were more in the allowance bucket, not the major projects. So regardless of what the dollar amount is in this plan, we just use the allowance and we kind of work within there. That way Allers isn't like significantly changing that bucket year to year, and we just make sure. And so basically there's gonna be a couple kind of implied directions here too. I will say with the EMS potential fire study, I would like to get that cost refined for next year's prioritization plan to help kind of fix that last kind of potential variable. And then there should be an expectation that there's A&E for community park shelter in the 26 budget from Sean. So I would approve. So I would say there's enough direction to approve the plan as presented with staff direction.
I would make the motion to approve the plan as presented with staff direction as discussed.
I'll second to keep things moving. So motion by Murphy, second by Kell-Nelson. Any more discussion?
I just have a clarifying question. Do we get another, like when the staff direction comes back, then we look at this and then we do the formal motion again?
So because the dollar amount in the allowances isn't gonna change, we just shift the projects. We could have Kyla provide an update, but I don't believe that the direction was to increase funding to fit those projects in. It was how can we shift our project deck to make these fit?
Got it. So for instance, if we swap out community park shelter and move up Progress Drive, but Progress Drive is, let's say 500,000 more, like that's where I'm wanting to like have a second go at this. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sure. So trying to think about this from a process perspective.
I think you will through the financial management plan, and then you'll also see the corresponding tax impacts of all these things too at that time.
Yeah, so there's gonna be, so the next process, if we're kind of taking it from budget process, it's gonna go to the financial management plan is gonna go to budget review with the approved project deck. The board could give budget review committee to also consider switching out Progress Drive and the community, or at least have that option presented. That's certainly something I can work with Ellers to have an option as. And then the financial management plan comes to the board for final approval. And then we get to do it even one more step further with all the budget memos for 26-7 projects. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping.
But we need to get a cost on Progress Drive is the key.
Yep, and so there should be time between now and when budget review committee gets us to get a proper cost estimate for consideration.
So are you talking also about adding A&E for community park in 2026?
So it would have to be kind of an either or. So if the, I guess you guys can do whatever you want. But if if for 2027, if you were going to move forward with community park, we would want to do the A&E in 26. So the current plan as approved would include, not in this plan, but it's going to show up in a budget because those happened the year prior. But then we would also show an example of A&E for Progress Drive and what that potential cost could be. And then we could figure on switching that out if needed or desired. Hopefully that's helpful. Maybe, possibly.
I already stated I'd like to see community park pushed out further, but that's just me.
I agree with Cindy.
I agree with Cindy as well.
So there will be some ongoing like additional maintenance that may be needed just to keep it like usable. Is that, I mean, it's older, so it's requiring additional maintenance. I guess
Also-
that would be a budget item that may increase.
How much maintenance is required to cover another 3 years, maybe?
And then can you also talk about how last year there was still a 10-year lifespan left on it? That's what I remember from last year's conversations about this.
So we brought in Strand and had him look at everything, so that we could get a better picture of which step we wanted to take. Rehab, the open air shelter, or the Four Seasons shelter. And they came up with that we need to do something within the next 2 to 5 years or we're gonna lose it. It's gonna be beyond repair. So the 2 to 5 year is kind of a Band-Aid. It still only gets us that 2 to 5 years, and then we're gonna have to look at replacing the whole thing at some point. So in the meantime, it would be tough to throw a lot of money at it to just try and Band-Aid it for possible 5 years. It's not gonna fall over in the next 2 to 5 years, I don't believe. The major issues that we have are electrical issues and ADA issues as far as getting into the shelter itself, as well as the restrooms. And those would,
What is the bare bones minimum that we need to spend to bridge 5 years?
$323,000.
But that includes ADA, and that's not an absolute requirement. So what is the true minimum required to bridge that facility?
We'd have to pick and choose to what we wanted to do. I don't have individuals broke down such as electrical or lighting or anything like that. It's just a lump sum. So I'd have to dive into that a little bit more.
Is it possible just to limp it along and not stick any money into it until?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just status quo in what we have in the challenges that we have at the shelter, but certainly.
I guess, like Paula, I thought the 3 options were kind of give us feedback to move forward, not we're gonna do it, whatever you pick now and next year. So I guess maybe that wasn't clear to me, but I would like to see it pushed out. Also, I recognize that there are challenges with that, and I know that you can't put 2 crock pots into the same circuit. And there are other significant ADA issues when it comes to bathrooms, and that is a heavily used park by a lot of people. So. I'm sorry, there was a motion and a second.
So are we amending to push the community park shelter out, or I guess I'm open to an amendment to the motion if that's.
I heard that the board would like to see what this looks like with it in and with it out. Unless there's a proposed different year that you'd like the in or out to. So right now it'd be proposed for 27. Is there a different year that the board would like to see it proposed?
I think 2030, didn't you say, Cindy?
I did say 2030. My memory was that this still had significant years left in it. But if it is 2 to 5 years, I think, yeah, we're probably pushing it at 2030, but I would like to see it moved out at least to maybe 28, 29.
I agree with Cindy. I'd rather not stick any money into it, and if we have to move things around for Progress Drive, I'd rather see money go towards that.
If the board's okay with it, again, with consensus, I can move it out till 2030 in the plan that's going to be presented. And then obviously getting the pricing for Progress Drive.
Okay, so that's included in the staff direction for the motion.
So then our motion and our second are still okay. All right, any more discussion? Does everyone feel like they have had an opportunity to discuss all of the projects and their comments? Does staff have any questions of the village board or needs from us? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right. Moving on to discuss and consider potential marketing opportunity with the International City Management Association. Matt, do you want to take this one?
Yes. So there's a memo in the packet. I included in there the email that was sent to me to invite us to participate in possibly creating essentially a marketing video for the village that would be featured at the International City Management Association's annual conference, which this year is down in Tampa, Florida. These events generally draw about 5,000 attendees, and the videos, once uploaded online, get on average about 15,000 views. There's a notable cost to it, and given this was brought to us about a week and a half ago, and just because of the timing of this meeting, rather than just saying no, we thought we'd look into, should the board, we included examples of these videos that are linked in there. If you guys see a value in it, we do have some money that's budgeted for these types of efforts, and we can also leverage our TIF districts and apply, in addition to that, towards a tourism grant. And we have discussed, Cindy and I met with the chamber, and they were favorable of it as far as potential to try to attract a second hotel, things like that. So happy to answer any questions you may have, and I kind of included some ways we could try to leverage this in there.
Go ahead.
I think it's a great opportunity, but I feel like we're kind of getting in over our skis a little bit. I love the idea of the Cottage Grove growing with hotel and tourism, but what I don't see is restaurants, more businesses, and I know that would come along with it, but that's my point, is that I don't know that spending that kind of money right now is feasible.
So I think that this is an interesting opportunity. We had someone come, was it last December, to do some marketing for Cottage Grove. We opted not to, but I think this probably has a bigger reach and a little bit more bang for your buck. And
that other one was a magazine
it was a print.
in business. It's a more localized magazine.
But I think that this is a tool that then it does have a bigger reach, so it's not just maybe a hotel, it's restaurants and other types of businesses, and it's highlighting our development district and the potential opportunities for those to come here. And I think if you get, one or two that do decide to develop in Cottage Grove, it's instantly worth it. I think this is also a testament to how much work village staff have put into development and into Cottage Grove, and the work that they've done to kind of, and in tourism and the chamber, and to promote Cottage Grove. That we have an international group or a national group that's interested in promoting Cottage Grove.
I too appreciate the departments and what they have done. And I'm curious, what is the research or what kind of return on the investment? And I have not watched the video, so maybe that's in there, but I'm curious about what the return on the investment has been for other villages or cities our size.
I didn't reach out to the any of these additional municipalities that have done the videos. I don't know if they've. Yeah, I mean, it's probably just purely anecdotal as far as ROI. I mean, some of it is just somewhat subjective as to if you guys see value in that amount of spend. Again, utilizing the TIF districts and a tourism grant and things like that. But as Cindy mentioned, it's, you know, if we find, depending on the business or entity that comes here, you know, it only takes one, but it's hard to say what that ROI would necessarily be.
I have a question about the funding sources here. There's the funding options here, TID 9 and 10, capital fund, and tourism grant. Can we not use the tourism funds for that? We have more than enough money in there for those.
So tourism funding with the room tax, 70% has to go to the chamber for tourism promotion and development. The other 30% does go into the general fund, but 70% has to go to the chamber, or goes through the tourism commission, which goes to the chamber.
Couldn't we use that money for this? I mean, one of the things stated in here was to support tourism.
I think the other 30% is committed to as a reimbursement grant for Comfort Suites.
So I think
I understand your question, Chris. I mean, the chamber, they have to look at how much this would benefit stays in a hotel or creating a second hotel from a tourism perspective. And certainly a good chunk of this would be geared towards economic development that could drive that. When we kind of discussed it, it sounded more like it would be in the scope of like a 50% match, so they could cover half of it. But we'd have to apply for a grant. But again, the chamber was supportive of it. I don't know if you have anything to add, Cameron.
No, you got it.
I just have another question. So as a city administrator, and you had mentioned, you know, one or two developers, hey, then we're getting our money back. But from your end as a city administrator, you know, are there other potential big developers that you've been working with that instead of using resources towards making a video, what I'm saying is that if there's other potential developers that you're working with that is also going to bring in the possibility of hotels, tourism, restaurants, shopping.
Yeah, I mean, we talk to developers all the time, but these would be developers that we don't know, that are from outside the area, that we don't have contact with.
This does.
Yeah, and also just when you're meeting someone new, if we're sitting down with them, we could play this 5-minute video as an example in a meeting to introduce them to Cottage Grove, that sort of thing.
So we get
I'm also not. I also want to make it clear,
this
this isn't any kind of hard sell. You guys aren't offending me if you don't want to move forward with it either. So we just really wanted to present the option. It's not on the agenda specifically, but we've been keeping you up to date on another option that could be different than this, but would still help market the village in a positive way, and we're not aware of cost in that option. But I do think potentially both of these marketing opportunities could be useful, but that's, you know, up to the eye of the beholder.
we do have, I mean, the chamber and Travel Cottage Grove promote that, you know, the village as well. But I think that this is just a little bit different in that it's not come and stay in the hotel and go to a restaurant and use the trail. This is more of, you know, develop your company here. And we do get the rights to it, so we would be able to use the marketing materials indefinitely.
And they'll be, we would also own all of the footage that they do. So if they come and take 2 to 3 hours of footage, we could have that and leverage that however we see fit as well.
And to me, this was the way it was presented, and all of the hours of footage and the reach it would have is a better opportunity than the print magazine was.
I don't know, has this been discussed locally with any local people that can do something similar? Local organizations that do the videotaping like you're discussing?
I mean, this was brought to us. I mean, if we want to do something totally different, we can reach out to others, but we weren't looking to, this was just an option that was brought to us.
I have a couple things. So just kind of 3 things. Discover Wisconsin is filming in Cottage Grove on Wednesday, so I'm excited about that. The Chamber's doing that, so that'll be good. I too, if we're gonna do anything, I would prefer a local marketing firm. I did watch the videos and they're very well done, but they also felt a little cookie cutter to me, like they're kind of the same kind of vibe. And I think if we went with a local marketing firm, we'd get more of our Midwestern flair. But my last kind of point is, and I think Cindy, you're gonna like this, do we have a strategic marketing plan?
We have a communications plan.
Okay, because where I would head with this is really looking at, okay, like when we look at our comp plan and all the things we're doing, is putting together a marketing plan that makes sense and that fits within those parameters. And I don't know if this is something like the CDA would take on. I feel like when it was first created, it did some of this kind of work. But I would like to see more of a tailored marketing plan that really talks about, who's the audience we're trying to reach, what's the best reach. I think you're right with the print media. I mean, that's a regional print thing. I don't think that's gonna get to our target audience of developers, but I would like to do that sort of scope first. I think there's a ton of value, and I appreciate you bringing it forward, Matt, in this concept, but I'd like to define a little bit more of a marketing strategy around this.
So I think that this is the marketing strategy in terms of like that particular like economic development niche that it's going after, not necessarily like all-encompassing travel Cottage Grove or discover Wisconsin, or I mean, this is a little bit more specific, and I think that that's why it's not a local firm either. We're not we haven't been targeting any of it anyway. But I think
the 5,000 attendees at this conference, are they developers or are they city managers?
City managers, consultants, exhibitors, yeah.
So there's a competition then, so to speak, like for developers within, okay.
I think it's a really interesting opportunity that maybe we haven't thought about. I think there was a series of videos that we made not that long ago. Am I right about that? There was, like, they interviewed some businesses and things. Like, that was the local strategy. So then this is more like a bigger reach, I guess. And those are always videos we could update with our communications plan that we have. But, I mean...
Aaron, do you remember when that was done and who that was done with? Was that Distillery?
Yeah, because I like interviewed the cafe down here and stuff. And I think those are great tools to have. So it'd be, if we could move this forward with just TIF funding, like I think that might be an interesting aspect. But I'm kind of on the fence on it. I'm glad that it's cool that they recognize that Cottage Grove is a growing place and it does have opportunity to have a greater reach than we usually have. But I think if we could do it all with TID funding, that would be great. But if there's not appetite from the board as a whole, that's okay with me too.
I agree with what Paula said. I really appreciate you bringing this forward, Matt. It is a great opportunity, and I'm going to add to what Paula said too. I like that idea of more molding it to more the Midwestern flair. And then my next point is, with the possible TID money, is there anything else that we would be able to use that TID money for?
Yes, with, I guess, we could certainly, so there's project plans that are defined for each TID district, and I always caveat, it's up to the funds that increment was created. Like most of the board is aware, TID 6 had eligible project costs, but didn't have revenue coming in, so it has been operating at a deficit. TID 9 and 10 are both projected to end up with positive revenues. So things that are eligible, we kind of have to think, would development happen but for this opportunity? So would this bring in somebody to develop within that area of the district for a specific reason? So we just have to work through each individual analysis on what could that option be.
Yeah, I would rather see our TID money work towards another option.
Any other thoughts on this opportunity?
Is there a set timeline for a decision on this? I saw your memo said something about the slots filling.
So their target is 20 slots, and a week ago they had 12 filled, and they had been working on it for a couple weeks. So it's technically possible that you guys would have, if you approved it, I could go talk to them tomorrow and it's already filled. So it's really just kind of as soon as possible, time frame, but I can check back in with them, and if there's, I can update you guys if you'd want.
I would just like a little time. I've not seen the communications plan. I don't even know where I would find that. But I'd like to take a look at that before, just to make sure it's all in alignment, right? Like.
Yeah, Inga can send it out.
Okay,
if for the most part, it's kind of like
It's more like guidelines.
It's more of like a menu of here's things that we would, that the consultant recommended for certain, to target this audience, here's the strategies, or if you're gonna do such and such communication, this is how they would propose moving forward, or when you're working on a particular project, here's some steps and things that they recommend. But yeah, we can get that out.
I think it was, presented last summer, fall, summer. So you can always, they came and gave presentations. You can go back and look at those slides and stuff too.
I found the videos on our YouTube page. There's 4 of them I see here from about a year ago. Cottage Grove promotional short, Cottage Grove promo, business development, and home. So there's a couple of them they were local that did that, right? Local to Addison area.
So did you need a decision from us tonight? Interest moving forward, or I'm kind of sensing that we're not interested.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that the mood of the board? Okay. Is Pete online? No hands, just checking. Okay. So we don't have to take action on that one? Okay, all right. We can discuss and consider a feasibility study on a public safety impact fee. There are a couple of memos and then an email that just came out. Paula, do you want to take over?
Sure. I will jump in, and I'm going to hopefully share my screen. Potentially, and then, sorry, I'm figuring out this technology here. Okay, so I requested to have this on the agenda for a couple of reasons. And I just want to just touch base on what you had in your packet. So you had a memo kind of overviewing it. And then I know I put a 2011 study in there. The reason I included that study is because in the recent WPPI study that we got a copy of that Sun Prairie did, they referenced that study, right? So I wanted to be able to tie those two things in together. And then just shortly before the meeting, I emailed all of you the slide deck, so you had this information, as well as a feasibility study that was done for Village of McFarland. So just a couple of notes. So impact fees are governed under state statute, and Rick and I were talking a little bit before about kind of some changes that were made and different things that go on with it. And just a disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. I am giving a high-level overview of these kind of things, and obviously Rick could answer any kind of main questions. But the idea behind an impact fee obviously is a one-time charge on new development to fund infrastructure and services. We currently have impact fees for water, sewer, and parks, but do not have a public safety impact fee. So what this represents to me is kind of like a forward-thinking approach, and it's really, the general theme is that growth should pay for growth. And so what got me thinking about this was obviously our conversation about the police department, but also some different things that have occurred over the last few months. So for instance, I know Chris, in the spring, you wrote a letter to the editor about public safety, right? And that there's not necessarily an increase of crime, but there's an increase of population. And, you know, obviously that population growth is driving the size of the PD and other things. And so that got me thinking about this. So really, this is a method that kind of helps developers pay their fair share, right? Of, they're making profits off of the rents. That growth should pay for growth. It also looks at preventing future budget issues when we get to the point where we need a new PD or a new EMS station. And then obviously we're already using it for water, sewer, and parks, right? So there's other best practices there. So legal requirements, I'm just, again, high level. To be able to do an impact fee, you have to do a needs assessment. These are things required by law. You have to hold a public hearing, adopt an impact fee ordinance. We already have one, obviously. For those other, we would have to make a modification there. You have to make sure that those funds are segregated, right? So that anything that's public safety related is separate from water, sewer. You have to specify an appeals process within your ordinance. And then you basically have to use or refund those impact fees if you don't use them within 8 years. So I wanted to note that as well. What the fee could fund, obviously the primary example right now is the police station. And obviously we've started kind of the process of planning for that. So if we were to do an impact fee for public safety, it's obviously not going to cover the whole thing, but it could certainly put a chunk into that amount. And when we talked during that process about being kind of uncomfortable with the price tag and having to punt some of the projects that we just talked about in prioritization, this would allow for some space and some room in that. Future needs, obviously, public impact fees cannot affect staffing, so we can't pay for increased staffing, but we can pay for equipment costs, building infrastructure, facility expansion or upgrades. So if we are looking at the emergency services building and trying to do any remodeling there versus building a second station, it would be used for that. And then obviously we have an $8 million line item that we just put in our prioritization for a future EMS fire station. It could cover that. I just wanted to kind of show, and again, my two sources for this are the WPPI study talked about the impact fees that other Dane County municipalities have and what they're for. So it's kind of runs the gamut, right? So like Windsor has $325 for fire and EMS, Verona $310 for fire EMS, Fitchburg calls it public safety. And then most notably, McFarland was not in that WPPI report, but I did, as I mentioned, I included their information. You know, we talked, or at least I did, I brought forth the questions about their public safety center and how they were able to do net zero and do all the things. Well, they instituted the public safety impact fee to help them pay for that public safety center. So this is just kind of an idea of what other municipalities are doing. As I mentioned, this cannot be used for staffing and operational costs. It can only be for those capital costs. But I used Cameron's very nice transparency tool website to pull these numbers from and put them in the graph, just as a reminder for us to see how our operational costs have increased. And from a taxpayer perspective, the taxpayers have really shouldered this burden, right? And so as I'm looking ahead, you know, the taxpayers, we're also asking them to shoulder the burden of a $20 million police station, and that is due to our growth. It's not due to our citizens that have lived here, you know, becoming crime bosses, right, and different things like that, but it's just the population that's coming in. And so I think that this would help alleviate some of that burden on the taxpayers, some of the burden on our budget, and just wanted to put this in for that. So why now? Why am I talking about this now? Obviously, our, you know, public safety needs are immediate and growing. Our police station is in process, so why not, you know, look at it now? I do worry, you know, the process is pretty lengthy and legally structured, and Rick can probably speak more to that. And so rather than waiting to the fall to begin, I think if we start putting the pieces into play, you know, that might even have some implications for the 2026 budget cycle. So I think we should start now to get ahead of that legal process. You know, obviously development is happening now and has been happening for years, and every new house or development that gets approved is a lost opportunity to help recapture some of these funds and put it toward some of these big infrastructure needs. The other reason I think not to wait to the fall is, you know, a public safety impact fee is not necessarily bundled, right? Water, sewer, parks, they're all different funds. You know, I think we certainly could have some coordination in terms of implementation time, that sort of thing, but it's really its own animal, if you will. And then, like I said, we can always coordinate implementation. I mean, maybe even the public hearing, and maybe Rick can speak more to that. The ordinance change, right, so that at least we're getting kind of some things lined up before that. So basically the first step in this process would be to look at that public facilities need assessment. And I think, you know, I don't know exactly what that needs to look like, but I feel like all of the studies that you did leading up to the police station really, I mean, I think the data and a lot of that information is there to make the case, at least to implement this to help pay for the police station. But that is the first step in this process. So that's just kind of a big overview, and I guess I would just leave it up for questions for myself or staff, but I think the timing on this with the police station, we'd need to move on it kind of quickly. And I'm not, and just to clarify, I am not suggesting where you saw the $2,000 McFarland, I'm not suggesting that. I don't have a dollar amount in mind, because really your needs assessment kind of ferrets those things out. But I just think we should be talking about it as a tool in our toolbox as a village board.
Comments from board members?
This is very impressive. Thank you for the information, Paula. And I guess if we some type of committee to look into this, or what were your thoughts if we're agreeable in moving this forward?
I'm not sure what the if we wanted to run through committee structure, what the most appropriate committee would be. You know, in my mind, I'm thinking CDA, but maybe not. I'm not sure. That's a great question.
So she mentioned this can only be used for capital costs. Are we able to use any impact fees to pay down any debt?
Yes, as long as it was in the study. So like, again, you know, you structure this to be a study's done, 20% of the building is for new development. You'd base the fees off of that 20%, and then those funds would be deposited into debt service. So instead of saving up for it, it's recapture.
Okay.
It's a common method of doing it.
Okay, I'm just thinking, I'm assuming this wouldn't go into effect until after probably we would approve the levy for the police station, but we could, going forward, we could use that money to help pay that down. In theory, I'm not saying that's what we should use it for, I'm just.
So because it likely is not gonna be in place when we would issue the debt, I wouldn't pledge future revenue from the impact fees for the debt. I would still pledge it on a GO basis, but it could be utilized so we don't levy as much on the public, the police station.
Okay. So I guess I'm on the fence about this. I like the idea in theory. I have a few concerns. I'm concerned that would increase the price of housing, first of all. The other, did you have any preference for like how to charge it? Because I saw there was a couple of different methods to charge it, like per unit, per square foot, per bedroom. I assume maybe that would be part of the study, but I don't want to like, you know, it seems like per unit would be punishing multifamily housing versus square footage might be more equitable, but I have no idea.
Yeah, no, that's, those are all open for discussion. Also, I do want to tell you that the statute does provide for, in item number 7, low-cost housing. So with an ordinance like this, you can actually provide an exemption from any affordable or low-income housing. So to take that burden off, you can write that into the ordinance.
Okay.
So quick, sorry, Chris.
Go
if
ahead,
you're
go
not done. Paula, just a question on, do you know in McFarland or any of these other examples how they addressed the commercial uses? How they included them? If you don't know, that's fine. I was just curious because I don't know myself either.
I don't. I think the McFarland thing that I sent out has that, but I certainly could dig into that and get more information on commercial versus residential. If that would be helpful.
Because I would just be curious, and we're not heavy on the retail side, but I would just be interested for an example for say, and again, we're not focused on big box stores, but you know, we get a just use Walmart as an example, even though Walmart is unlikely to, you know, anyway, as an example, that would be a big driver from a public safety perspective. So I would think it's orders of magnitude well above any kind of residential unit type use. So just kind of interested in how those different uses ramp up. Because that kind of happens with certainly water and sewer from an impact perspective. I don't know if you know, Cameron.
Yeah, typically these are by, our water and sewer is a little different, but it's typically by square feet. So the McFarland example is 1,216 per 1,000 square feet for commercial and industrial.
Man, I want you to know you've just doomed us all to talking to people about rumors about Walmart coming to the village. The other question I had was sort of putting safeguards on this. I guess I'd be for it if it offloads some of the general spending. What I don't want to see happen is, you know, we have to use it in 8 years. We get 8 years down the road, we haven't used it, and then be like, oh, we've got to use this. Let's buy an armored vehicle or something like that. Something that we don't really need, but they want to spend the money because they have it. I don't really want to see that, but if it helps offload some of the general spending, I think that could be useful.
That is legit. I mean, that's a legit concern. And I think, you know, even the ladder truck, right? The $1 million ladder, I mean, that's another potential use for that. I don't think, given the police station, the potential EMS station, the ladder truck, engine 4, I mean, I don't think we'd have a problem spending it, to be honest with you. And we're a little bit, I don't want to say behind, but by the time it got implemented, right, it's, like I said, it's not probably going to make a huge chunk in the police station, but maybe it helps alleviate costs elsewhere.
Cameron,
Yeah.
can you, all of our microphones on, can you maybe speak a little bit to what kind of fund we would be generating here? Are we talking like millions of dollars?
So it all stems back to the feasibility study. So ultimately what we'd be determining is what of the proposed facility that we're creating, how much of it we kind of create a base scenario, which would be today, and then 10, 20 years from now, and what is the square footage that is required as of the growth, and then developing a fee around how do we, based off of projected development, both commercial, residential, recapture that. But it all stems on growth and new. So like one example, for example, the ladder truck wouldn't qualify because we already have a ladder truck unless we purchase a second ladder truck. So that would be something that wouldn't be eligible for impact fees because it's not driven by a new need. Similar with engine 4, we already have that. And so what is important to note with impact fees is they're very specific, so that you list out 4 or 5 things that you're gonna fund with it, and that's what you have to do unless you retire that fee and create a new one. We're currently going through this process with water and sewer, so that will be presented around August 13th, kind of coming down the pipeline.
I guess we do have water, sewer, and parks that are fairly high fees.
And parks are not an impact, I guess. So I think we need to step back. Like when I'm looking at this, I'm stepping back as a new resident or a new community member, potentially. What is the all-in cost? What is the building permit cost? What are all the fees associated with becoming a member of the community? And so when you kind of take a step back, yes, the park and lieu fees are a cost, but they're not an impact fee. They're a little bit less stringent, whereas water and sewer are very kind of to the T here, which is what this would be. Earlier this year, kind of as the housing chapter wrapped up, I started surveying other communities and kind of what their fees were. Some communities are kind of going away from this method, as kind of Dane County has demonstrated that the cost of land continues when we're looking at what it is to develop on a single home. It continues to skyrocket, especially in Dane County and Milwaukee County. And so a lot of the times that's what they're looking at. And then similarly, kind of the mantra is typically cash funded projects are what impact fees are designed for, because then we have to kind of, okay, this property is gonna have a levy associated with the debt. We don't get to pick and choose which houses. So it's almost like double paying in some instances, where not only did you pay to get into the system, each year you're levying your proportionate share for the project. So they're just all things to consider when implementing things like this.
How much does a feasibility study cost?
What's the scope here? If we're looking at if we're looking at just the police station, because we have the facility and everything kind of mapped out, it would be whatever's chief time in and probably 15,000. Probably another 5,000 in legal and ordinance, so 20,000.
I guess the question, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I can go last, doesn't matter to me, so.
I know we have a lot kind of set up for the police station already, but like I do get kind of concerned that like these people would be taxed twice for the police station, because they'd be taxed when they're borrowing it, and an impact fee is a tax essentially. They'd be taxed on that. So like kind of paying double when we already have high costs. Like I'd be more interested in looking at implementing this as we look at the EMS station and, or, like potential fire EMS addition or second station that we might need due to growth, and the, like, how are we strategically planning that? Like, that's the stuff we've talked about, like, where is the station best physically located, like, and wrapping it into that kind of needs assessment rather than going back with the police station. Like, I guess that's kind of where, like, that really is further growth driven. Like, we've already kind of established this need for police station, so
I think one of the questions I had that goes back to our conversation is, you know, compromising on some of the things like the size and the cost, and the idea that we were building it for growth out to 2040, right? So that's why I feel like if we're building it toward growth in that year and the population projections that were given to us during that police discussion, I think it fits now, because we were planning that building to, you know, bring in all this new development, right, based on those numbers. So I see where you're going, that we've already started this process with the station, but you know, even in those conversations, I alluded to this as a tool if we were really thinking ahead toward that growth, and that was kind of my compromise, if you will, to say, okay, let's stick with the size building with these projections.
Just thinking that, I mean, fire and EMS are districts, and so would other municipalities be joining us with impact fees, or, I mean, or are we
I think where I took this
moving
from
directions on that? I just
is the 2022 PPA study that the village board had done, where it said that if there is a second station, that it would be kind of the responsibility of the village. That's, I guess, where my head was at, and I took that as a frame of reference for a second station.
So if we have some kind of shared thing with another village, can we pay our portion with some impact fees while they don't, they just pay out of their general? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, yep.
Okay, thank you. I also had another question that I can't think of at the moment.
I mean, knowing that we are kind of like revising the scope for the fire and EMS, is there a way to maybe, and I already did it, edited in the, like a impact fee feasibility kind of study in there? If, I don't know if that could be part of the overarching scope of this study that we're about to partake in, but.
So what I would recommend would be you'd get the results of that feasibility study and facility study, and that would tell you 5 years from now you're going to need this, 10 years, and then you take that and then you turn that over and then do a impact feasibility and analysis and implement it. Different ways to going. The big crux on impact fees is it has to be identifiable. What are you going to do in the study, and how much is it going to cost, and how much of it is because of new. All of those variables have to be answered prior to implementation.
So you said we can't use it to pay for things we already have, like we can't do the fire truck because we already have a fire truck. So we've got 9 police squads right now. We can't use it to replace those, but if we need a 10th, could we use it to replace that?
I
Or
would
to purchase that?
strongly encourage not using impact fees on vehicles. You could.
It's just mostly for buildings?
Correct, and the dollar amounts that you're talking about. Yeah. Vehicles and equipment outside of utilities, that practice is very seldomly used.
Why?
It's a wonderful question.
The statute does say for public facilities, so it's land costs, like actual construction, like vehicle costs, they don't necessarily fit within the definition for the use of the impact fee.
Okay.
I guess just a couple of other comments. So one thing to keep in mind with the impact fee, like Cameron said, they're for identifiable projects. So once that project is paid off, like we're not going to be able to collect that impact fee unless we do another study. We've got other identifiable projects. And then also the impact fee, this may or may not be important to you, but we can't like use it to be increasing the level of service. So it's just to maintain the current level of service that we're providing for the residents. So you can get kind of creative on how you measure it, but and like just throwing out numbers, like if you've got like, I don't know, if your level of service is like so many EM paramedics per 1,000 people, like that's your level of service. So your facilities have to stay in line with that. You can't use impact fees to increase the quality of the service.
Is there a definition of public safety for a public safety impact fee? Is it just police, fire, EMS?
Could be whatever.
Right.
Like, could it be
You could create an impact fee
traffic
for
calming?
correct. You can create an impact fee for anything. We can
Okay.
yeah. Well, almost anything, not vehicles, as Rick alluded to.
So I feel like because we are hopefully about to embark on a fire EMS study next year, that maybe this is a conversation that we should, impact fee, that we should revisit after we get the results of that study. So we have a better idea of costs and timing.
Is there any part of the study that we could get started on now? Like, I guess, I don't know, just because I'm coming back to how you, not necessarily the level of charge, but how you charge for it, like you per unit or per square foot or whatever.
Is that something that,
started on?
is the housing chapter review doing anything with?
TBD.
That was the intent of collecting some of the data. Aaron and I had reached out to communities to see what the fees are to make sure that we aren't creating a barrier. It was something that the housing, as you're updating the housing chapter, something to consider the complexion of impact fees and what does the village board want impact fees to look like in the future. I can tell you already, just preliminary working we're talking at least double for water and sewer for what the proposed fees are. Again, because we try to cash fund utility projects as often as possible. And that's very identifiable infrastructure. So like an example would be well 5. We can operate right now without well 5, but we will need a future well to fund. So that would be one thing that would be included or is being considered to be included.
Yeah, like I said before, I do have some concerns about it impacting cost of housing. However, I do think there are some potential benefits. I mean, a common concern some people have when we talk about new development is if it's going to strain services and stuff. And I think this could be a good answer to that, saying, well, it's a new development, potentially has a lot of units, but they're paying impact fees to sort of address that issue. So I don't know, maybe for some of the multifamily skeptics out there, would this, make them more open-minded to multifamily development?
Since it does impact like the cost of overall development, commercial and residential, in this case, we'd potentially be talking about commercial impact fee for public safety. Would it be appropriate to ask staff to maybe bring an overall, kind of gather all the fees together and present it to maybe Plan Commission that could refer it up to here, just so we can look at what's the whole package of cost to develop in the village? I'm just thinking because they kind of see development first and deal with the comprehensive plan, if that would be an appropriate committee to kind of bring this up through that could look at the whole in comparison with other communities. Is that, I don't know if my colleagues would think that would be a good route to take this.
So as I kind of mentioned, water and sewer impact fees are in review. Before finalizing that study, the goal was to bring impact fees and our parkland fees and building permit fees to the village board and plan to see what, is this the direction you want to go? And the answer might be yes. But just kind of getting that identified. That's probably 4 months out, 3-4 months out. So I know there's a concern about some this being time sensitive.
But we could include looking at what public safety fees are currently set at in other communities.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly reach out to different organizations that do these studies and ask, hey, we're interested in possibly implementing this, without a formal study. Can you give us what's high level this could look like for consideration? That wouldn't be 15,000. That would be much less.
I think any movement, right? Like any investigation, any conversation is good, right? And perhaps, if we can't use it for the police station, right, we're going to be paying it off for a number of years. But at the very least, could we be in a position, rather than having to borrow $8 million in 2030, that we're only borrowing 4 because we've collected impact fees, right? I just want to be forward thinking with these things. So it doesn't have to be today, but if we can even just take steps. And again, for me, it alleviates some of the burden on the taxpayers, right? For the new development coming in. So, whatever we can do.
So I'm not really sure, I don't think this is enough direction to staff at this time.
I
but
guess
how do we?
What I would recommend is that I work with Aaron to bring it at a future housing chapter. Hopefully that's okay. And then we could maybe bring a high-level recommendation to the board. The expectation, though, is that's not going to be soon. So we'll take the time. Aaron and I can give the board updates at where we're at. But in order.
Sorry, Cameron, I was going to add in, could you guys also maybe just use some average years of new housing builds and miscellaneous other development, and maybe a hypothetical fee of 1,000 or something like that. That might even be on the high end, and just see like what that would amount to in a 5 or 10 or 15-year window or something like that. I don't know if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's my hurdle, is implementing a fee, but what exactly, I guess all the answers that a feasibility study would have.
Yeah.
I'd like a little more information before
but to see like
moving forward.
what that number could look like as far as helping offsetting costs down the road.
I think that's great, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the questions and the potential hurdles. And I appreciate the clarification on equipment. I read that wrong in the statute apparently, so I appreciate that as well. So I think that's great. I know that we don't have an ad hoc housing meeting set yet, our next one. We're kind of waiting on the county for that, but I'm going to send an email and kind of check where we're at in that process with them. So hopefully we can get moving on that.
So it sounds like Aaron and Cam can work with the ad hoc housing to start information seeking. So I don't think we have to take any action on that now.
There will be at a future board meeting, we may have to incur some costs looking at this, so I'll just update the board about estimate and just making sure that the board's comfortable moving forward.
Okay. Sound good? All right, so let's move on to discuss and consider the application from Downdrans.
I can maybe provide a little bit of background on what this is. So there was a law change last year that went into effect regarding manufacturers, rectifiers, and distillers of alcohol. So they can have like these sort of like pop-up shops under state law. So the like Downdrans, because I don't know if they qualify as a manufacturer, distiller, rectifier, but one of those, they get their DOR approval. If they want to open like a full service retail area, they can do so in other locations. The statute says that they need municipal approval, but municipal approval is limited. So we can apply the same standards that we would for like a regular retail license if we have something in ordinance. We've tried to address these things through some zoning in the last year, but we don't have anything specific on like the actual approval for these like pop-up sites. So, like I said, they would have already gone through Department of Revenue approval. So these are just sort of like temporary sites that they are asking for municipal approval for.
And I am on the line if there's any further questions, but thank you for that background.
And do we treat this like do they have to have a fenced-in area, right, that's designated for this and like those types of things?
No. It's, like I said, we can only treat them the same way we would with like, if it's a requirement we impose on a retailer. But I think this would be a good opportunity for us to look at the ordinances and how we have to treat everybody the same. So these rectifiers, we have to treat them the same as anybody that would apply for a retail class A or B or class B license. So they have to have operators, which I believe these people are licensed operators. So like the same alcohol licensing rules would apply in that sense. But no, these pop-up tents are kind of their own separate thing.
Paula, it's really meant to be like something that allows manufacturers to go, the great example is to go to a farmer's market or go to some sort of community market space where previously we could not bring our own bottles of alcohol and sell those at a farmer's market, period. That was not legal. Now through this application process, if you qualify, which we do, we have received like the minimum criteria to even be able to do this. You have to be obviously in good standing with the state, and you have to have this full service retail outlet license, which our facility does have. And then that grants you the ability to have up to 2 external locations throughout like the year. One of them is fixed location and one of them is rotating location that you can then apply to basically go sell the products at these other markets. And so it opens an avenue for us to be able to do things similar to other, as mentioned, other retailers.
That makes sense, and I'm all for that. I guess my question is when it gets into at a public event like this, you know, when I think about like Fireman's Festival or even like our bars, right? Like their outdoor locations have to be fenced in, and so I was more so on that piece of the sampling, right? I get the retail, somebody buys a closed bottle, that's one thing, but if we're actually kind of in essence serving, like does that?
Yeah. So the way it actually works technically for this marketplace day is like, I'm not intending to sell bottles. So technically I don't need any licensing. I can give out free samples within the bounds of the law. You're only allowed to give an individual up to 2, I think it's half-ounce samples. Like that's a legally mandated process entirely separately from this. And so I had submitted for 2 events, the Marketplace Days and the Taste of Cottage Grove. At this point, we have worked out a deal with the Piggly Wiggly that we are, instead of selling bottles at Marketplace Days, we're just gonna like give out a coupon and try and push people inside to buy bottles. But so we were just gonna do the tasting, like the samples, which like I said, technically I don't even need this for that portion. But when I submitted it a week ago, that was my plan. But then at the Taste of Cottage Grove, which there's a separate application for, it is our intention to serve like a drink and people can buy bottles. But that I think is a much more restricted, physically accessible area where it's inside of a building. But I'm not serving a cocktail to anybody at Marketplace Days. That's not there's even a section on the application for what you're intending to do. Mm-hmm. And you have to communicate that, and I'm not going to be doing that.
Perfect, and thank you for the clarification on sample size and such.
There's two applications that are linked in the agenda, one for Marketplace Days, which is July 19th, and the other for the Taste of Cottage Grove, which is August 21st. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
I'm in support because I feel like we do need to support our small businesses in the community. So I appreciate the questions and reaching out.
And I'd make the motion to approve the producer full-service retail sales application from Downdrins Distilling for July 19th, 2025 and August 21st, 2025 as presented.
Second.
All right, there's a motion by Murphy and a second by Severson. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Let's move on to reports from village boards, commissions, and committees. The library board is up first. We met on Wednesday, June 18th at 4:30 because we did end up having a little celebration for Tracy, who was had her last day in May, and she has been, so we had a resolution of appreciation that we approved unanimously, because building something from the ground up, I think, takes a tremendous amount of effort, and so she really spearheaded that initiative, which Monica DiCarlo is our new librarian. She was hired on June 17th. She's very excited to start, and I think this week or next week is Shark Week, and so we are getting back into a kind of a heavy load of programming, which you'll see come out in the next handful of weeks. We reallocated about $2,000 and gave direction to Monica to increase programming at Glen Grove, and so that'll occur most likely starting at the end of the month or the beginning of August, and we're going to try and do a handful of programs there that's every week, month, and then also kind of incorporating some more activities at the park that I know a lot of those kids travel down to North Lawn Park, so we're going to kind of do a little bit more enrichments over there. And the entire community is obviously welcome to join us at any time at any program. We approved our bills. We will be at community night outs. We will not have an August meeting, but our next July meeting is on Wednesday, the 16th. And we will have updates on programming and updates on the community read, which is usually in the fall as well. Any questions about the library board? All right. Move on to Plan Commission, which met after we had cake for Tracy on Wednesday, June 18th at 6:30. We heard from a potential developer about a presentation, so it would be on Vilas and Coffeetown, kind of aimed at the missing middle, cost-effective, increased density, a little bit outside of the comp plan. Aaron, you're gonna have to correct me if I'm butchering this at all. But looking at single family, about 300, 350 units, and multifamily, 400 and 450 units, with about 35 acres of park conservation as well, connection to the Glacial Drumlin Trail. Estimated timeline would be over about 10 years. So this was just the initial concept plan. It's kind of that housing blend that's currently kind of missing in Cottage Grove. A lot of 4 and 8 kind of twin homes were kind of the targets. Do you want to add anything?
Basically, these are the longtime property owners. They're hoping to engage with the developer to actually complete the project, but they're just looking for a little bit more flexibility than what the comp plan currently offers. So a lot of steps to that. It would have to go back to the plan commission and then come here. So we'll see that again before anything changes.
Yeah. And our next meeting is on this Wednesday. Any questions about Plan Commission? All right, Deer Grove EMS.
So I'm, did you, okay. This was for the June 19th meeting. They are seeing some delay in payments. via mail by insurance, which is not unusual. Chief's report applied for 2023 supplemental payments on transport. Let's see. Looking at the calls, estimated 54 Medicaid calls are estimated to be as much as $50,000, which are due at the end of June from 2024. There was, I skipped this part, one new member, Ike Beeford, a couple letters of correspondence who were expressing gratitude for the great service they had received, discussing unassigned fund balance. So the FAP award in 2025 is $77,000. They are evaluating replacing the response car and looking at leveraging the FAP money. So it was brought up to maybe look at the cost of an Explorer versus a truck. I can't remember what type of truck that was proposed. Determining how the 2024 FAP money can be used. And Steve, one of the members, is going to contact the county on building a vehicle instead of using the FAP money. And future agenda items, fire EMS study to be determined.
Any questions?
Thank you. Renee subbed in for me for that meeting, so I appreciate that. I can speak to the collective bargaining meeting. So we have established a subcommittee of Deer Grove EMS specifically to work on collective bargaining, and it is obviously Chief Lang, myself, Christy Williams from the town, and Carrie Hewitt from Village of Deerfield. We had an initial meeting, and we will be meeting with union representatives on Monday to start those talks and so forth. So we've got a good cadence to try to get a couple of these meetings done and out of the way so that we can bring forth some things to Cameron and such for budget time.
If I could have a moment for some clarity.
Yes, please.
Okay, so there's a lot of acronyms that we use in EMS, since we are EMS, you know. So there are things that can become easily confused. First off, the Medicaid calls for service. There's a federal pass-through opportunity for what's called GEMT, or Ground Emergency Medical Transport dollars. We have to submit cost data information to the program for this. That's where the 54 calls for service came in. They will supplementally reimburse us for 2023 and 2024 based off of our calls for service. So the dollars, the $55-ish thousand that Renee mentioned was what we are projected to be reimbursed for fiscal year 2023. But that has to go through a desk evaluation and the whole process to have that number confirmed. We won't likely receive payment till September for that. We submitted our 2024 data in June. The numbers are somewhat similar, but we won't go through the process and know those specifically and get payment till November. The larger discussion about the funding assistance program and fund balance is where the discussion centered on for the response vehicle information is that we have a fund balance amount between 20 and 25% of the operating. We are closer to 28% after our audit. So that was what initiated the discussion, is if we have an opportunity to use some of that fund balance to defray costs to the municipalities, we would. Working on gathering more information on that, and we'll bring it back.
All right, thanks, Eric. Anyone have any comments or questions for Eric or commission members? Enforcement.
We met on Tuesday, June 24th at 5:30 p.m. Approved the minutes. No public appearances. We got an update about the restorative justice program that's getting started. We got an update about the joint law enforcement records management system membership. As I recall, one key recently left, so we're going to continue to monitor the situation as we go forward. And then we talked and approved about temporary no parking signs on Vilas Road within the village limits to sort of prevent people from parking it there. It's kind of a dangerous place to park. We got chief's report about the different traffic stops and the like. SRO reports, K9 report, things like that. And then we adjourned. And that's it.
Questions for Chris? All right, so let's move on to Parks, Rec, and Forestry. Heidi.
Yep, so we met on Thursday, June 26th, and we approved our minutes, and then we went over the Shady Grove Park concept presentation, and kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit to shave off and create some efficiencies, reduce some costs. The surfacing is planned to be like the surfacing at Houston Park, and created the playground footprint to like make that surfacing as efficient as possible, and kind of the way it's oriented to try and shave that down some. We had Park Development Fund tagged for that for this year, so we're kind of moving through how it would look to do a phased approach versus full. And so there's some changes that the committee asked to make, so then that would come forward here to the board, the concept layout, probably at the next meeting, after they make those modifications that we talked about at Parks Committee. And Houston Park is complete. There were just a few very minor punch list things that have probably even been taken care of by now. And the cost came in slightly under budget and at the end of the day. Back to the Shady Grove Park. Sean is going to reach out to some neighborhood people that have been interested in the park to talk about the park name, because the committee wasn't sure if they wanted to call it Shady Grove Park, so kind of incorporate some of the like natural features in the area and see what some of the neighborhood people might want to have that park named. Like the West Lawn Park is Red Hawk Park, which is the street that it's on. So, see if some of the residents had some input on that. We talked about the Bakken Park update and went over the recommendations from the board with the overflow area and the ADA recommendations that the board wanted to see moving forward. And then Sean went over all the summer programming, which is busy, of course, and that's the meat of the meeting. Unless, Sean, you have something you want to add? Cameron?
For the proclamation.
Yes.
I think kind of as we step back, the 2025 budget laid out Shady Grove's improvements prior to a certain development over there being closer to completion. So as Sean and I kind of were discussing the development of Shady Grove Park, it was always kind of the plan to do phase 2 once we collected the heyday development fees in lieu of parkland to finish that park. I think we both were really pleasantly surprised when we saw the estimate come back less than what the two phases significantly less than the two phases separately were. I think through our discussion, there's no rush to get this park out to bid yet. So kind of working with the timeline and Strand to figure out what's the best timeline to get when to bid the project out. Is the beginning of next year the right time, or should we try to get it out yet this year? Those are things that Sean and I are still working on. We would like the fees in hand. So we would like the permit to be pulled for that project and have the cash in hand prior to making a full commitment to the phase 2, which is why you haven't seen this brought back to the board yet. But just want the board to be aware that information wasn't available during the 2025 budget creation. So this is what would trigger that second stage of this project.
So like pairing the two phases and then the other efficiencies, like the whole project together is coming out significantly less than what we had planned in the two phases.
Very happy to report, yes. You don't have the double of the mobilization. Kind of all came together really nice.
But that'll be in front of the board in the future. And tonight, the only thing we have in front of us is the proclamation to designate July as Parks and Recreation Month.
So that's to discuss and consider.
I will make a motion to approve proclaiming July as Parks and Recreation Month in Cottage Grove.
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion by Stowe and a second by Edwinzo. Any discussion?
We're going to continue to work on the other 11 months, so that's just a constant thing, so.
Look forward to seeing it in August again. Okay. All those in favor?
I know Rick won't allow that to happen, but we're going to try.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, fire. Most of us were there, but who would like to take it?
I can run through that.
Okay.
Chief's report, there were 175 service calls as of June 25th, averaging 0.99 calls per day. The chief's operating draft of the operating budget was reviewed. And we discussed I just lost it here. The pay on
Per.
paper call, which they initially were wondering if that was going to be two separate issues in addition to the, I'm trying to pull this up here and I'm. Service awards. And they're going to discuss the service awards at their board meeting and bring that back at the next meeting. And that's relatively it, unless I forgot anything else.
I had a couple more things, because that was a pretty significant budget item. So as part of the plan, the village board gave feedback to the fire commission to provide a paid per call pay model along with the LOSA benefit. So what the fire department did was provide a budget that included that. The rough increase in cost was about $111,000 overall. That's not just the line items we're talking about, but other line items within their budget. So based off of the feedback that the village board gave me, along with what I'm hearing at Fire Commission, is we tentatively have that to be included in our financial management plan. So again, that can always, final budget can be reduced or increased, it's gotta come from somewhere. But right now, the full freight will be included in the financial management plan. The town is gonna bring it to their meeting on July 21st. So they wanted to talk about it a little bit more at their meeting to get a broader picture. In addition, the emergency service building budget, which is a co-budget that the fire commission approves, will also be discussed at the July fire meeting because there's some things that are in that budget that would affect the town's decision on the fire budget. So both Kim and I plan to be at the next fire meeting along with, not the 21st meeting because I'll probably be here. But that's kind of where that's at. There's kind of a couple different approaches here that as we'll discuss it during the budget process. But because it wouldn't be 2 years of significant increases, one of the ways that, again, I also mentioned this at fire, would be to step up and use a little bit of fund balance year one take half the hit in year one, half the hit in year two, in order to not have as a significant tax impact. But we'll work through those mechanics a little bit later in budget cycle.
I think both village and town are aiming to have the fire EMS scope for the study on those agendas for the 21st as well.
And I guess I would just throw into, because there might be other budgetary concerns. Steve Anders from the town mentioned then looking at length of service awards for EMS volunteers. So there could be ripple effects coming with that as well.
Which will be on the EMS agenda. Eric is gathering that information, and that'll be on EMS Commission later.
Yeah.
And I would just convey some of the town's concerns that we heard at the meeting, because we all know that their levy limits exist and based on net new construction. And well, of course, we feel the crunch at the village. We have, a lot of growth here to help that net new construction number, and the town, they may not have as much flexibility. So I think working with them to find the model that fits financially for them, I think, is probably more challenging on their side. But the net new construction numbers come out the end of the month, or is it in August?
August 1st.
August 1st.
Yep, and that's, and again, it feels like we might be a little bit ahead of the game, but because these are so significant changes, I felt it was very important to get it in front of both boards.
Mm-hmm. All right, anything else for fire? Otherwise, reports from village officers. Rick?
Nothing to report.
Excellent. Cameron?
Budget update, the next budget meeting, significant budget meeting will be August 13th, which will be the water and sewer long-range cash flow analysis. Similar to the capital prioritization process here, we'll mix both operating and capital and end up what a projected sewer and water rate will be over the next 5 and 10 years. And then leading into the first draft of the financial management plan on August 19th, which the next day is community night out. Which is why that day is there.
All right. Any questions for any of the village officers? Okay. Communications and miscellaneous business. Consider approval of vouchers.
I would move approval of the vouchers as presented with one small change. Penny Aguilera's name is spelt wrong. It's missing an A in it.
I would second that.
All right, there's a motion by Severson and a second by Murphy. Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Correspondence. The village board did receive an email from a young constituent that is interested in community space. You all received that email looking for some idea for some existing space where teens and students can study. And so her letter was attached to that email that we all got. Just quick glancing. Does anyone else have any other correspondence? Okay. Upcoming community events. Nothing's happening in Cottage Grove.
Marketplace Days?
Okay, Marketplace Days is on, just approved it,
Saturday the 19th.
Saturday the 19th.
The village has a booth, and the police department has a booth, and a lot of local businesses, and it's going to be a great day.
This isn't really an event, but the housing chapter updates survey is out. So if anybody hasn't filled that out, please fill it out.
When's the deadline for that?
Monday, July 21st, 2025.
Thanks, Chris.
And you all have some postcards there, so feel free to hand them out as you're talking to residents and constituents.
Okay. All right, future agenda items. I feel like we had some discussions tonight, so I'm sure things will be happening in committees, and we'll trickle back up to the village board.
I started to go through the village code to see if there's anything to clean up. I was hoping to have it tonight, but I couldn't get it done in time, so hopefully we'll have it next time. Very exciting.
Thanks, Chris.
That one, Chris is taking the fall. We'll have it for the next one.
All right. We need to go into closed session, correct? All right. I'll make a motion to, we have a closed session on the agenda considering an appeal regarding an application for operator license. So I'll make a motion that the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where power applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, this is a roll call vote.
Benzo?
Aye.
Dahl? Kel Nelson? Murphy?
Aye.
Severson? Aye. And Stoa?